Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Early morning. Office. A meeting where a young and successful lawyer can barely keep his head upright. Sam can barely keep his eyes on the face of his mentor and boss Vanessa, who is excited about Sam's upcoming victories. Vanessa is gushing to the rest of her colleagues about how Sam has taken on the most difficult court case, of what meticulous style goes into success. But Sam doesn't care about that right now. He just wants to sleep. For the last time, having gathered all his strength in a fist and pretending to be a fighting spirit in the next moment, Sam smoothly transferred everything to a quiet, cool forest, where a brook murmurs in the distance. Birds were singing and bouncing on the branches of 1,000-year-old fir trees. Green grass envelops Sam's face. Somewhere in the distance, under the blue sky, flocks of white birds are circling. Sam lazily rises from the grass, glances at the bundle containing his night tent and smiles, anticipating a night of rest. There is still plenty of time before evening. For now we can relax, he thinks, and slowly reaches for his backpack. In unison with the sound of lightning comes the aroma of homemade cinnamon-baked goods. Mom took care of it. I mean, she's my golden one, thinks Sam as he unwraps a fresh bun in a paper bag. Next, he pulls out a container of fools and cutlets. A second container is piled with fish and homemade tomatoes. Underneath them are several more containers, and the most important treat awaits Sam in the corner of the backpack. It is his portable liter thermos with coffee, with cream, which also Mother herself brewed, poured, and put in the backpack. The Glade turned out great. Only Sam was about to take a sip of coffee aroma, as Sam shouted, "I'm setting you as an example to everyone here, and you disgrace me with your behavior. I can see why it's a promising case. It's going negative day after day. If you don't get a grip on yourself, you've got every right to put an end to your law career." Suddenly, it's Vanessa. Sam opened his eyes and managed to regret 1,000 times that he hadn't stayed forever. "Where I just set up the clearing. I missed something important. Vanessa, I'm sorry. I just didn't have time for coffee this morning," Sam said, and his eyes started to slip shut again. "Sam, how much can you resort to childish scumbags? Last week, in exactly this condition, you were sitting and negotiating with a representative of our new partner. But you can't do that. It's even just unethical," Vanessa said, trying to sound stern. "I agree with you, but this is solvable in a matter of hours, which I can't find in 24 hours, said Sam. "To finish this habitual conversation with my supervisor as quickly as possible, and once again try to get back to my meadow with my birds chirping." The meeting was finally over. Sam hurried to his office with a thought about the unfairness of life, to human beings, and the infinity of their suffering. He decided to once again gather his strength into a fist and hold out until the lunch break. There it would be possible to take at least a little nap, when his coworkers left for lunch at the nearest cafe. Sam, with such an optimistic mood, began to prepare for the upcoming court hearing. True, in 5 minutes. His hands did not press the keyboard chaotically. The numbers in front of his eyes began to float, and in an instant, Sam again found himself on the forest lawn, where his beautiful meadow was waiting untouched. Favor to the picture added an important detail: four-legged friend of Sam's childhood, Mango, who has long been dead. Mango occasionally appeared in his dreams and took him to distant childhood carefree lands. And here he appeared again unexpectedly and waited for him by the clearing. Sam rejoiced when he saw his little dog Mango. He hugged her, rubbing his face on his coarse mango fur. "It's so good to be together. Don't go away, I feel bad without you anymore," he mumbled, playing with his friend. Suddenly, there was the sound of a gunshot to the face. And at that moment, Sam almost fell from his chair, hearing the squeak and scream of Vanessa. "Sam, now that's the height of cynicism. You just got back from vacation. Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" said Vanessa, and walked away. Sam realized with bitterness in his heart that all this wonderful thing that was happening to him was just a dream. And the sound of the gunshot was Vanessa's voice. Judging by the hint in the dream, she wasn't kidding about getting fired. Sam jumped out of his chair and ran after his boss. He caught up with her when she had already entered her office. "Vanessa, I'm offering you a deal." From now on, you pretend not to notice my condition, and I will somehow miraculously bring victories at all meetings. How did he tell you that? Without even talking me into it, I've had enough. You've been saying that for 6 months. I'd be fine if it were true. We know it's just an excuse. You sleep in clubs at night, so you don't have the energy to work. So from now on, your work won't get in the way of your fun. You can go clubbing 24 hours a day. Young people were very different in our time. We read books, went to the theater on weekends, and slept like normal people at night. And we got up at dawn and showed a shocking pace of labor. For me personally, it is just unbearable to see such inertia at such a young age as yours, said Vanessa. You're right, of course. But entertainment is a cost of my work. I can't be in charge of people's lives all day long, and then sleep well at night. I need to see the bright side of life once in a while, or I'll go crazy with the worries of my clients, said Sam. This is a clear sign of degradation and moral decay. If things continue like this, one of these days we're going to have to part with you on ethical grounds. You need to think about that, Vanessa said. Sam sat down on the edge of the chair and clutched his head with his hands. We need to be clear about who's breaking up with whom, he thought with a grin. He would have given up on everything himself and would have been sitting somewhere else a long time ago, if it weren't for one big reason. It's a mysterious girl named Alice who works in the office next door. Vanessa, I'm asking you to give me one last chance. I'll make it up to you. I promise. It won't happen again. It's very stupid, even for me. But I can't live without this office, Sam said, taking a seat across from his boss and looking her straight in the eye. How can I believe your words? She asked. Sam felt like cursing, but that would be a failed strategy. You only need to keep Mom here for 6 months to have time to find an approach to this. Also, Sam had to resort to professional secrets. I will honestly tell you I am very loyal to this company. As it is here from your wise guidance I have become a lawyer. Who would have thought it? Just 4 years ago, when I came in with a green law graduate, I could not have imagined what professional opportunities would open up for me here. And it's all thanks to you. Vanessa, you're the one leading us the right way, like Moses leading his people through the desert. Along the way, revealing the secrets and subtleties of such a difficult profession. But there is one small nuance. I really want to be believed in me, to be supported, not extinguished for the slightest misdeeds. And I am a young, ambitious, and promising manager who only needs to be directed in the right direction. And I find the way myself. You yourself said these phrases when you hired me. Let's remember those times and try to correct the situation together. Without your guidance, I can't get out of this dead end either. I begged Sam, why do you go into acting? You're wasting your talent. I'll forgive you this time. Thanks to your ingenuity. But let's not make fools of ourselves. You don't keep respectable people waiting in the morning. Keep up your professional ethics. Show up on time and normal. Do your job. You'll be worth your weight. It's a deal, Vanessa said, already visibly changing her tone. When Sam left his boss's office and headed for the kitchen, he heard a familiar voice behind him. What's up, loser? I hope you've already been kicked out for unprofessionalism. Robert, his colleague and competitor, shouted ironically after him. Only after you on the upcoming trial of the Bank 3 Stars. I'll tear you to pieces. You'll lose. You'll face your clients. And then Vanessa herself will not want you here, replied Sam. You won't, buddy. I got it covered. You need to look for a new job instead of consoling yourself. By the way, I saw this ad. They're looking for a lentil delivery guy. Just for you, said Robert snidely. Sam didn't want to escalate the argument. He did not want to waste his nerves on this kidnapped and in love colleague. But his jokes had long since stopped being just jokes. Ever since Sam began to do well, he was unable to hide the fact that he felt outright envy. Sam was even a little turned on by it. I wish I could rub everyone's nose in it every time. Isn't that a good idea? All the more reason for him to deserve it, he thought, pouring himself a cup of coffee a little later. He liked his idea very much. Now Sam was determined to start a new life. In the evening of the same day, Sam was sitting in his kitchen chatting on the phone with a friend. Sam, so what about the rest of the party? The girls are waiting. What time will you be there? A friend asked Max. I'm sorry, Max, but now you and I are not on the same path, answered Sam. What's with the attitude? Are you in trouble? You won't believe this, but I've decided to start a new life. I've hired a coach to help me succeed in my career, conquer this unapproachable Alice, and become a human being. I even have a farm on my refrigerator. I'm creating a new reality. And you said a word about some clubs? I think you're still reeling from last night. Let me fix you up with a couple beers, and you'll come to your senses, Max suggested. No, Max is dead serious. It's not nice to tempt a decent man with the devil's tricks. I risk ruining my reputation. I realize I've made it as a professional, but not yet as a person. And my job is stressful. I'm not clinging to it, though. I could have gotten a job elsewhere without any trouble. But there's one. In the office next door, she's a tough nut to crack. If I don't get her, I can't forgive myself for failing so badly. So I have to be patient with my boss for a while, said Sam. Sorry, buddy. You're really screwed. Max laughed into the phone. You just be a decent person for a couple days. And on Friday night, I'll call you while I entertain the girls. He decided to start a new life. Haha. Max laughed until Sam hung up the phone. No, what? You gotta come to your senses and grow up sometime. So Max doesn't sabotage, we'll move on. Sam said to himself and started dialing his mother's phone number. She picked up the phone quickly. Her surprise was unrivaled. Sam's son. What happened again? She asked, disturbed. Hi, Mom. Why is there something wrong? Can a grown-up son just call his parents and ask about their health? How's Dad? How's his treatment going? Why don't we send him to a resort somewhere? Get away together, Sam said. I'm worried about you. Let's get it straight. What's wrong? You wrecked the car again. There's trouble at work. What is it this time? Asked my mother. Mom, if you don't want to have a serious talk, maybe I shouldn't call you. You don't believe your grown son can finally get a grip on his mind and just become responsible either, said the words of my God. He heard my prayers. Of course I do, son. I do. Besides, it's high time you started thinking about these things. 30 years old is a good age. What was the cause of it all? Mom asked. It doesn't matter. That's not what I'm talking about. That's what I'm calling about. Tell your dad not to worry about me, to think more about your health. I'll give you the same advice. Get plenty of rest. Take care of your health. You'll need it to nurse your grandchildren. That's what you wanted, didn't you? Asked Sam. Of course, son. It's such a long-awaited happiness for us. Who's the bride? When did you meet her? Asked Mom, almost fainting with joy. In a couple of months, we still need to pull up some things at work. I'm still aimed at career growth, and it requires concentration. As soon as I get things straightened out, I'll let you know the date and place of meeting your fiancée. Will you like her? Said Sam, imagining how the noble Alice would impress his family. Then he dialed another number. The husky voice at the end of the line did not immediately recognize him. Andrew, hello, it's Sam. I work in your law firm Platon and Partners. We sometimes cross paths with you when you come to our office, Sam said. Oh yeah, I remember some of the words. Is there a problem? Asked the boss. No, I just wanted to ask about your health. After all, health is a man's greatest asset, especially at your advanced age. But small. I know that's not why you're calling. Speak plainly. There's something wrong with the company. Asked Andrew. Everything's fine. I've got a new case about to close successfully. We're looking at a 6-figure retainer. And you hinted to me a couple months ago that you wouldn't mind defaming the whole company. I'm just thinking about it now. And it feels good. It's inspiring, Sam said. I take your point. But you should know that Vanessa is my most trusted confidant. She and I have been doing business together for 20 years. I can't just throw her out on the street unless she wants to retire, Andrew said. You are right, Andrew. In fact, Vanessa could use a well-deserved rest, as she has been having a lot of problems at work lately, falling asleep in a meeting or forgetting important meetings. But we certainly support her, help her out of deep respect for her status and age. I think we will continue to do the same, even if she gets worse, Sam said. Sam, I hear you. You will notice in her place. Let's keep this conversation between us for now. I'll think about your candidacy. If you continue to perform well, why not? For Vanessa, I can find another position that's less of a hassle, but it'll take time. I'll think about it, Andrew promised. When the conversation was over, Sam felt an unprecedented satisfaction. It turned out that the prospect of growing up was very interesting. It seemed to be the key to all doors. And why hadn't he thought of doing it before? Sam got up, walked over to the refrigerator, and read his detailed plan for inspiration. 3 months from now to meet Alice's parents. 6 months from now to get married. At the same time, he should depose Vanessa and take her place. And in a year, when he will take his son from the hospital, he will celebrate his promotion to vice president of his company. It's beautiful. Now we can sleep. Meanwhile, in one of the parallel realities in another part of the planet, there was a conversation between 2 executives. Paul, I am glad that we finally managed to enter the market, and soon we will open our branch there. Your merit in this is invaluable. This was the head of a large foreign corporation, Mark. Thank you for your appreciation, Mark. But we can really rejoice when the opening is successful, and we reach the expected figures in just a few months, replied Paul. You are right, Paul. We have big plans and the goals are very important. I'd like to talk to you more about that. To be honest, you puzzled me when you said that you refuse to run the new branch and that you want to be in the background. In that case, I'd like to hear your proposal for a new manager. It has to be a proven person. We need to find one from our own circle of managers on this scale, and you can't take on a new branch from outside. It would be a big risk, Mark said. I see your point. Are you asking me if I have someone in mind? Paul asked. Exactly, the boss answered. There's a guy. He just happens to live in the town where we'll be turning around. I can vouch for him 100%. His name is Sam. We've been friends since we were kids. We haven't talked as much in recent years, but I wouldn't mind doing some serious business with him. He's an accomplished lawyer now, Paul said. And what is Sam remarkable? Tell me, said Mark. It was back when I was a kid. We were both backyard kids. There was a swampy lake not far from our town. We go out there sometimes, swim in safe places. There were markings you couldn't cross. Legend had it. What kind of markings live there? Swamp devils. And if a person gets close to it, the devils can drag you into the swamp. We believed in this legend and were afraid to step over the markings. But one day, when we were playing soccer on the lawn, the unexpected happened near the lake. Our ball flew far beyond the marks. The boys ran after the ball and stopped at the mark, not daring to step over it. Then one of us said that we could quickly jump into the swamp, take the ball and go back along the surface. Before the swamp devils woke up and noticed us. I considered myself the bravest among the locals. It was important for me to save face, so I then said, guys, it's all nothing. There are no devils in the swamps. That's how grown-ups fool us. You'll see for yourself. I'll go get my sword. The boys were surprised at my decision, but no one discouraged me. Except Sam. He said that vanity ruins young men, and we laughed at his words and called him a coward. I went into the swamp. Indeed, the surface turned out to be not so dangerous. After taking a few steps, I reached the ball, grabbed it, and threw it to the guys on the shore. And when I turned around to climb back out, I felt my feet hit a cold and dense space with no support. I tried to lean on the other foot to get out of the hole, but immediately I felt the bottomless density under the second foot. By that time, my companions had already returned to the lawn and started playing, and I panicked when I called for help. The guys didn't believe me. They said I was just scaring them like adults. But Sam didn't argue. He quickly undressed and went into the swamp too. By that time, I was already slowly sinking into the water at full height. The water reached my chest, and the more my legs dangled, the faster I was sinking, and I realized that I would never get out of the swamp. But Sam was already standing a step away from me and pulling my hand out. Sam, get out of here. We could sink together. I shouted to him, no fool. Give me your hand and stop panicking. Shouted back at him. I gave my hand, but my hopes were in vain. Sam too was trapped underwater. I started to dangle my legs harder. I went deeper and deeper under the water. Then Sam shouted to me, Paul, stop fussing, you'll get out. He yelled. I thought he was just calming me down, but Sam realized it in time. Paul, don't be such an idiot. Just stop wiggling your feet. Relax and try to lie on your back. Leave your legs alone. Get on your hands and try to get out across, not up, he said. Only then did it dawn on me that Sam was not just reassuring, but actually trying to help. Following his cues, I managed to free one leg, but by then Sam himself was pulled in deep. When I finally managed to get out, Sam was no longer visible on the surface. I was devastated by what had happened. I thought that my comrade had died saving me, but tragedy was avoided. By that time, the other guys had managed to call the forest ranger, who were not far away. Those pulled to the shore Sam, who was unconscious. When my comrade came to his senses, I asked him if he realized that he was risking his life. His answer struck me very hard. He said yes, but I would not have forgiven myself if I had not tried to save you, he said then. Since that day, Sam has been imprinted in my memory as an example of a loyal friend, a brave man, and a real man. This is the man I would like to propose to us as a new companion. Hall concluded his monologue. What? The story is very touching. If your friend in childhood was so wonderful, I think that adulthood has only made him better. Then you should call him ahead of time and feel him out just in case. If he has other plans, we should try to entice him to join us, Mark said. On a most ordinary morning, Sam was awakened by an early phone call. Slavinsky, are you still sleeping there? Did you even recognize your friend? Asked a cheerful male voice. Hall is my friend. How could I not recognize you? How come I remembered you? Did you come or what? Sam rejoiced. Not yet, but I will be soon and for a long time. In fact, that's why I'm calling you. And how do you accept promising offers from old friends? Asked Paul. Well, let's say, and you heard from my boss, Mark. He's opening a new branch office in your town. I'll be the vice president of the new company, and we need a reliable man to run it. There's only one reliable person I know. That's you. How do you feel about running an entire finance company? Your lawyering experience and knowledge will come in handy. You don't have to worry about the salary. Mark values his top managers highly. You'll be on the list of not-so-poor people in a year or two, Paul said. Your offer comes in handy. I've almost hit my ceiling in my little office. I'm looking forward to moving up. When can I expect you? Asked Sam excitedly. If everything goes according to plan, then in about 3 months we will already begin to realize what we have planned. Counting on this time, I will arrive in advance, and the first thing I will do is to contact you, and then the boss himself will arrive. I'll introduce you to him. I'm sure you're paying, Paul said. The friends said goodbye on an optimistic note. Sam hung up the phone and shrieked with joy. Vanessa and Robert, you're both going to the woods for mushrooms soon. And your hated Sam will be flying on private jets and giving interviews to the leading channels of the country. He said aloud. Then he got out of bed and headed for the bathroom, not yet realizing what fate had in store for him. Walking into the bathroom, Sam was surprised not to see his reflection in the mirror. To be more precise, he saw only his head in the mirror, and then in the lowest part. What kind of joke is this? He said and stretched his hand above his head. His hand appeared in the mirror. Sam took the stool, brought it into the bathroom, put it in front of the mirror, and stood on it. And now you can see his full height. True, his height is no longer the same, even less than 1 meter. And his face is the same as it was 23 years ago, when he was 6 years old. Sam was slowly panicking. He had certainly had a good dream of his childhood yesterday, but he wasn't going to literally go back there. He convinced himself that it was some sort of glitch in his perception. Not believing what he saw, he went into the living room and stood in front of the large mirror. Yeah, mirrors don't lie. His childish appearance really came back to him. Sam sat down on the sofa and began to think hard about the reasons for this transformation. But no clue could be found in his head. After sitting for an hour, he finally decided to drink coffee. Suddenly, everything would fall into place. But when I walked into the kitchen, I found a little note next to the coffee maker. You wanted to go back to your childhood, to sleep and play. Here it is. But you can become an adult again at any time if a grown-up girl loves you and kisses you on the lips. He read the words. Then he searched his apartment in vain for someone who could have written it. Called Max's friend, asked tons of questions, went to the mirror dozens of times and looked out of himself. But from all this nothing in his new life changed. The time was directly approaching 8 o'clock and reminded him that successful lawyer Sam could not be late for important meetings. Little Sam was frustrated as his short legs struggled to reach the pedals of the car. And if his feet could be placed on the pedal, his head was already below the horizon of the road. His attempts to adjust had failed, and the hours were running out. He had to call a cab. Seeing Sam's successful lawyer, the cab driver ran out of the car, took a passive leather folder from his hands and put it on the back seat. "Why are you carrying such heavy weights all by yourself?" "Dad's briefcase decided to show off at school," said the driver. "He's moving off." Sam was angry at first and then tried to seize the opportunity. "Yes, you're right. My father is an important man, but he's a little sick right now, so I decided to go to work instead and finalize an important deal," said Sam. The driver first laughed, looking into the child's clear eyes through the rearview mirror, and then asked, "Well, how are you going to close an important deal? Do you even know who to tell and what to say? Maybe you're just Sacco eating lessons?" asked the driver. "You're being ironic. I'm telling the truth. I'm an expert on the level of my father. It was he who taught me. Wouldn't you like to make an extra couple $100 an hour?" Sam asked. "Is that a good idea? What do you have to do? I hope it's not criminal," asked the driver. "How can I encourage you to do something illegal?" "Morals and ethics. That is the basis of public order in my charge," said Sam to demonstrate his reliability. "Mouth said that, but say what you have to do." The driver interjected. "I'm worried that I might not be allowed in my father's place. The masses think in stereotypes, you know. They'll think that since I'm so small, I don't know or know how to do anything. Maybe you're filling in for me at one of my court hearings," said Sam. "Are you seriously asking me to act as an attorney at a court hearing? I have a degree in engineering, of course. But with the lawyer's role, I don't know how well it will work out. I'm afraid you and I will be exposed." "Then there will be trouble," said the driver. "Fear is the eternal obstacle to change in life. It's your right to refuse," said Sam and turned away to the window. "Are you offended? I'm just worried about you." "I don't even feel bad about helping you for free," said the driver, noticing his resentment. "So you agree? That's fine. Here's the plan. You keep your cell phone on at all times. You and I will be in touch. That way I can hear what the others are saying. And I'll text you back. All you have to do is read out the standard phrases. Our job is to get the trial rescheduled to a new date." "That's it. I've said the words." So word for word, Sam persuaded William the cabbie to play lawyer. Technically, everything had been worked out. Thanks to Sam's efforts, the bankruptcy court case was able to be rescheduled to another date. William walked out of the courtroom and was surprised. "Listen, kid, this is how I can become a real lawyer. I didn't know it was that easy," he said. "That's not all. Now you need to go to my client's representative and get the money. He'll be waiting for you in the cafe on the first floor, and I'll be outside on the bench. I'll see you there. I'll give you your fee," said Sam and headed out into the street, a small green garden on the territory of the business center. Sam had noticed this place in the morning. As soon as he saw the fountains, small statuettes of cute animals and squirrels jumping on the branches, his eyes lit up. And now he was hurrying to that place to get a closer look at everything, while William got the money and brought it to him. Sam set the heavy leather briefcase on the bench and headed toward the statue. But on the way, his attention was caught by a cat that was sitting under the bench and looking up, looking up, looking up. Sam saw those very cute squirrels jumping from one branch to another. "I wish I could catch one," he thought, and started looking for ways to climb the tree. The tree turned out to be convenient for the eye not now left. He crept up to the squirrel so that they would not have time to sneak away from him. The cat sat below and watched with interest. This encouraged Sam even more. So he didn't notice how much time passed about the cat and William downstairs. He remembered when he got hungry. Sam let go of the squirrel and went down to the ground to call William. But all his attempts were in vain. Only a couple of hours later, a short message came from Volodya. The money turned out to be good for me, thanks, kid. Good luck with your studies. Sam still couldn't believe he'd been duped. He tried calling again and again, texting William in the style of so unfair. We had a deal, but all he got in response were smiley faces. As the time approached noon, Sam's phone rang again. There's a reason they say trouble doesn't come alone. It was Vanessa. Sam decided to play along and win at least this phone call. What if tomorrow morning he woke up a grown man again? Yes, Vanessa, do you have something urgent? He asked, trying to sound as serious as possible. Forgive the words. If this is a bad time, I saw on your task list that you have an important meeting today. I wasn't going to distract you for a while. Interrupted? Yes, I'm listening to you. Speak, said Sam, even more seriously. Andrew dropped by and said he wanted to talk to you about a serious matter. Said it was important. He promised to come back next week when you're free. That's actually what I wanted to tell you, the supervisor replied. Do you know what he's here for? Maybe you have some options. Sam decided to feel the ground under his feet, remembering the recent conversation with the main boss about his promotion. He said we were ready for a new change. He also said something about personnel issues. I figured that was all he wanted to discuss with you, Vanessa said. Sam was glad that, although his body and manners were childish now, he still had his lawyer's sense and knowledge. He immediately sensed the uncertainty in Vanessa's voice, and he was right. Because Vanessa's evil tongues had already told him that Andrew wanted to make a number of personnel changes. Besides, Andrew himself did not hide his obvious sympathy for Sam when talking to Vanessa. And Vanessa also had her instincts. Having analyzed the situation, she understood everything correctly. Her position of leadership was shaken. Andrew usually acts decisively in such matters. If he wants to appoint someone, he appoints them without a second thought. The same goes for firing someone. Vanessa became uneasy. Wandering around all day chasing city squirrels, crows, and yard cats. Sam didn't notice the evening had come. He was terribly hungry and had no idea what to do in such cases. He also found that his clothes were dirty, and his pants were even snagged and ridiculously torn. As he passed a fast food outlet not far from his house, he smelled the aroma of shawarma and rejoiced. This was what he really needed. He walked into the roadside establishment, took a seat at a table, and ordered all of his favorites. True, he was only able to eat half of his order. When it was time to pay, Sam reached into his pants pocket. That's where the tragedy of adulthood hits him. Not enough money to pay for what he bought. And across the street, a menacing waiter is standing there, losing patience with the boy's slowness with every passing second. I told you to be careful with unaccompanied children. You can't do anything with them. Now he's going to make you feel sorry for accidentally losing the money. They do that a lot. They spend their pocket money on gambling, and then they get pissy. He'll clean up his own mess, said his colleague, a girl passing by. I'm not going to push pity, Sam muttered to her. But then you're in a hurry, kid. People are waiting for a table to be free, the waiter hurried. Sam thought about it and decided that the right thing to do in this case would be to be honest. And he has no choice. Kids always have a complicated relationship with money. He had plenty this morning, and now he can't even remember where he put it down. After thinking for a few minutes, he took out his cell phone and dialed a number he usually dials very rarely. Mom, hi, he said with sadness in his voice. Sam, what's wrong with your voice? Are you sick or a jerk? Asked his mother. What's wrong with my voice? Asked Sam. But it's kind of childish, insecure, or something. I thought it might be something wrong, replied the mother. Mom, here's the thing. It's a little hard to explain. Dad has to come get me and pay for the shawarma, said Sam. That's a bad joke, son. You stopped eating kebabs 15 years ago. You like good meat. How could kebab be in your life? Mother laughed. Mom, I'm serious. There's a bigger problem here than kebabs. Let Dad come. I'll tell him everything when I meet him. Sam insisted. In the end, the mother bewilderedly agreed to send the father, and at the same time came herself. Seeing an 8-year-old boy instead of a 30-year-old man, the mother and father looked at each other and sighed heavily. Sam was searching for words to explain his mysterious transformation. But his mother sat down beside him and said, "Don't be upset. We all realized what had happened to you. I had a premonition of it," she said, while Frank's father was paying off the waiter. "Well, don't tell us much. What are your plans for life now?" His father patted him on the shoulder when they had already gotten into the car. "I have an important meeting tomorrow. I was wondering if you could go in my place. I'll tell you what to say over the phone. You only have to repeat yourself," Sam said, hiding his torn pants with his hands. "Mother, we should get our son some new clothes on the way. And yes, Lawyer Sam, we suggest you stay with us for a while. We're not strangers after all. We saw you once when you were as old as you are now. We still do. And now we'd love to have you like this," Dad said. "Stop. Mom, Dad, don't you even want to ask me what happened to me? How did you even know what happened?" asked Sam with surprise. Mom smiled and said, "It's your genes, son." Sam was even more surprised. "What do you mean genes? Are you saying that this happened to someone else before me?" he asked. "But Dad, will you tell me or will I tell you?" asked his mother with a smile, looking at his father. "I was 25 years old, just graduated from the institute and got a job. And then bang, I wake up in the morning and see myself like you in small. Of course, I was frightened, but then I found a note on the table that I could return to adulthood only after I was kissed by my beloved, that is, your mother. And she didn't even know I was in love with her then," Frank said. Sam wondered, "Why didn't you ever tell us about it?" "So how did you manage to get out of that matrix glitch?" he asked. "I had to hustle to get your mom to pay attention to me. And then I had to find an approach and win her heart," Dad said. "What a surprise, Dad. I got a letter too. The condition is the same. I have to be kissed by a girl who doesn't even know I'm here. But I'm more worried about the prospects. I've got some big cases coming up. And a promotion. And maybe even the management of a new company. I've got 3 months. What do I do?" "Well, you're gonna have to win this girl over in 3 months. Or can you just leave it at that? You'll grow up in a natural rhythm, take a break from your career and get a better mind," said the father and laughed. Sam, horrified. "What are you talking about? You're suggesting that I go to school in the morning for 10 more years, then go to university for 5 more years, and go through Vanessa's set of experiences all over again. Oh no, put me in a foster home or an orphanage. But I don't want to go through all that again. I actually dreamed of childhood because I really wanted to sleep. And now I realize how wrong I was. You can't sleep when you're being cheated at every turn, when money's flowing out of your pocket. Every adult looks down on you. Would your own parents be willing to put you in school for 10 years? No, I don't want that," Sam said, and started whining. "But that's enough whining. Dad has experience. He'll help you." "You will, Dad." The mother turned to her husband. "You have to look at it. If the girl is worthy, why not? If our dummy in his 30s fell in love with some bitch, he deserves to be punished by growing up again. Let him go to school and university. Maybe he should even join the army for discipline. And you and I will have a chance to fill in the gaps in his upbringing. That one was frivolous. We'll finally raise a mature man," Dad said. "What's it all about now? We'll go to see her together," asked Sam. "No, son, that would look silly. We're going to focus on growing you into a mature man. As long as you get a second chance," said the father. The family council ended with Sam going back to school soon. Despite Sam's resistance, his parents promised to take care of his upbringing and studies. But he didn't have time to argue much, as he fell asleep at the table after eating his mother's cutlets and drinking the yogurt he had begged for on the way home. Alice woke up in a bad mood this morning because she had been dreaming about her Nick all night. They've been dating for 2 years now, a year of which has consisted of hurt feelings and disagreements. "I have to end it. I don't want that kind of relationship," Alice thought, pouring herself a cup of coffee. But then the phone rang and she saw the caller's name on the screen. It made her immediately forget her plans. It was already warm and bright in the city. "And that's probably because my sunshine is already up and going to work," Nick said. "Where have you been? I waited for you all night last night. Why didn't you even call?" asked Alice. "I was out with my friends. But tonight I'm all yours, he replied. I'll think about it. Tonight I may have plans of my own, said Alice. What can I say then? I suggested it, Nick replied. Alice finished the conversation and realized that her mood had deteriorated even more. True, she had no other plans for the evening and did not foresee any. But the guy's indifference pissed her off. But it wasn't evening yet. The day passed without much fun. Alice had to go to a job she didn't like, all day to pretend to be a workaholic waiting for the end of the working day. When she got off work, she decided to have a little holiday by herself. She made plans in her head. Until a child's voice called out to her, "Girl, you're so beautiful. I haven't met anyone like you anywhere else," said a small chubby boy, catching up with her from behind. "Oh, hello, you're so cute. Thanks for the compliment," she smiled. "And this flower for you? I picked it myself in the garden behind that building." The boy pointed in the direction. "Thank you. Why did you get lost alone?" Alice asked. "It's a long conversation. I really don't want to upset you with my tragic story," said the boy and bowed his head. "That won't do. You're a man. Come on, tell me what happened. Maybe there's something I can do to help you," said Alice. She knelt down in front of the boy. "No, I'm sorry. I don't want to burden anyone. It's just something I read in a book. Treat others the way you want to be treated." "So I wanted to do something nice for someone," the boy said inside. "Where are you going now? Do your parents know that you are walking alone in the city?" Alice asked. "They don't know. They're at work right now, but they're golden. I wander so aimlessly looking for the meaning of events in the world," said the boy. Alice laughed. "You're very funny. Would you like to keep me company? I'm going to a cafe. We'll sit nearby, eat, have a nice chat. Then I'll walk you out," said Alice. The boy was happy. "I'd love to. Only I have one condition," he said. "And what's that?" "I'll pay for dinner. I have money. I saved it from my allowance. Here it is," said the boy and patted his pants pocket. "Oh, you Skoda. Let's go, let's eat first, then we'll figure it out," said Alice. The boy walked beside her, feeling proud that he was walking next to such a beauty. They entered the cafe, took a seat by the window. The waiter came up. "For Mademoiselle, the best wine," said the boy to the waiter. Alice laughed. "Don't mind him," he joked. "I don't plan to drink tonight. And give my vis-a-vis a milkshake and something to eat." "What do you like?" Alice asked. "I'd actually prefer Tartarstan, but it's better at Claude Monet's. By the way, next time we'll go there," said the boy to Alice. "For now, I think I'll be content with veal and turek," he added. Alice laughed the whole time and ordered herself something fancy too. "And he hadn't even told me his name yet." "Business boy," Alice said when the waiter left. "Sam is my name." "I will be immensely happy if you call me just the Lord of my soul," Sam replied. Alice was laughing now. And you know, when beautiful girls laugh, it has the same effect on men as owning the coolest car, said Sam. "How old are you, smart?" she asked. "God willing. Health will be 8 this year. I intend to celebrate this day lavishly. I've already discussed with my parents all the expenses. They'll take care of them. I hope you will not refuse me the honor of being respected my guest," said the words. "And how do your parents feel about you socializing with grown-up girls?" "They would probably be shocked," asked Alice. "Don't worry. They have liberal views and everything relationship issue is no exception, although they themselves lead a traditional way of life. They have been married for almost 35 years, said Sam. "I think they are unique people. They deserve to tell the whole country on TV about how to raise such a son," said Alice. "Would you want a son like that?" I asked Sam suddenly. Did Alice blossom? Her eyes lit up. Who wouldn't want one? Of course I would. But his father would have to be like that. I'm having trouble choosing. Men always come across as infantile, Alice said. "I understand. I've been through it myself," said Sam and stared at Alice. "Did you go through it in kindergarten or something?" Alice laughed. "I have a long life story to tell in parts. For now, I just want to enjoy this evening. Look at the beautiful couples walking along the streets of our cities. I wish I could join their ranks someday," Sam said wistfully. The whole evening passed merrily, while Alice interjected, and every pearl of the fictitious boy was photographed with him. She videotaped some of his quotes to show her friends. Sam didn't refuse her anything. You won't invite me home, of course, and as a real gentleman in the future, of course, I won't ask. But thank you for the evening. Would you mind if I waited for you at the exit from work from time to time? I asked Sam goodbye. No, I wouldn't mind. The main thing is that parents do not think badly and do not worry, said Alice. She said goodbye and went home in high spirits. Sam time, it's almost 9 o'clock. Why haven't you gotten ready for school yet? Asked my father the early morning. Dad, I've been doing things since 8 o'clock. I'm working. Vanessa's looking for me. And I've got a meeting with Andrew coming up. We were just discussing my promotion earlier. Now we have to do something about it, preferably without losing money. Dad, you're the only one who can help me with that. So I'll be a couple hours late from work, said my 8-year-old son, who can barely carry his backpack from school to home. Son, save your business for better times. Things will work out. Or will you grow up? Then you'll get organized again. In the meantime, enjoy your childhood. Besides, we've already agreed that this time it's on me and Mom. Frank said, Dad, are you kidding? You're 55 now, and by the time you get me back on my feet, you'll be 75. Isn't that a lot of energy and resources for one kid? So knock it off. I've got exactly 3 months, and I can hold on to what I've accomplished and put myself out there. You'll see, just don't refuse to help me, said Sam. After a long argument, Frank agreed to help his son. Today, they would have a meeting with Andrew, who intended to appoint Sam to run his small company instead of Vanessa. Sam persuaded his father to go to the meeting with him. What would be the result? What will be the reaction of a solid man to a father with a young son? Both have no idea. Hello, Andrew. Permission to come in. A little boy knocked on his door. Boy, who are you? What are you doing here? He was surprised. I'm here with my grandfather. We're here on business. But let's not talk from the doorstep, the boy said. Seeing a child and a grown man, Andrew thought that this is one of the many who regularly ask him to sponsor various social projects. But the boy started talking about something else. Andrew, you know my father well. Sam, I'm his son. And here is my grandfather. We came to you on his behalf, Sam said. And how is that? Why didn't he come himself? I haven't been able to catch him for 2 weeks. Did something happen to him? Asked Andrew. He's all right. You can do all your business with me instead, said the boy. Andrew smiled. No, it won't work that way. I need Sam myself, and you won't distract me. Dismissed, he said, and pointed to the door. Why? Why do you trust the close people of someone who is able to win a millionaire's divorce suit? Why wouldn't you want to deal with those who stood by you? When Sam himself found the victims, alarmed the bank, gathered all the victims, convinced them to write a statement, and then at the trial he was able to prove the bank's guilt. Yeah, he didn't win that case yet, but it's a matter of time. You don't allow the idea that if Sam has such a support group around him, he is capable of making mountains. What does your business sense think about that? Asked the boy. Oh, you're so smart. When will you grow up? You're the one I trust with a lot of things, said Andrew. Well, then consider me a little copy of Sam. In fact, you can even discuss personnel matters with me. I remember my dad saying the other day that he was getting a promotion with your help. I approved of his bold move at the time. If I can impress you, I'm sure I can take my father's place during his absence, the boy said, but that's out of line. The law says I can't hire kids, no matter how smart they are. You better try to get more A's. Then you'll be more useful, Andrew said. I also remembered Dad telling me that the final court hearing was in a couple weeks. If Dad doesn't make it back from his trip by then, here's my phone number, one call from you, and I'll perform brilliantly at the trial. And then it's just a matter of time before you win, the boy said, writing down some numbers on a piece of paper. Andrew laughed. Grandpa, he's not only smart, but also enterprising. Well, I'll know who to consult from now on. You just tell Sam not to fool around and come back soon. Good lawyers are indispensable, Andrew said. That concluded the negotiations. Dad, I don't understand why you were sad. Asked Sam when they went outside. What's there to be happy about? You see, we couldn't persuade him to let you continue working in your childish form. We've failed you, he said. No, it's too early to draw conclusions. It's not that obvious how it all works. The main thing is that we manage to run certain scenarios in the boss's head. Like how I handle the lawsuit if I can't be an adult again by then. That's one. Secondly, we showed him that Sam has a team behind him, which positions Sam as a good, decent family man. Although that's a far cry from reality. I didn't expect him to say yes right away. They're the boss, and they don't decide anything right off the bat. You have to give them an idea a little at a time, and they'll mature slowly. The important thing is that we've started the process. You'll see closer to the case. He'll call me himself, you have my word. What is this? Some kind of lawyer trick? Frank asked his son. Not exactly a lawyer's trick. It's used by all politicians, businessmen, smart officials, and executives of all stripes. If you act slowly, you can tempt a person to do anything. Here, for example, our neighbor Maria lives with her alcoholic husband and doesn't know how to get out of her nightmarish life into another reality. You know, there's a funny thing about that, said the Word. What's the joke? Dad asked. If Maria at the beginning of their novel showed their life together with her husband in a fast pace, there's no way she would have agreed to tie her life to him. It's just that all these alcoholics, tyrants, and other teachers to them know how to play the long strategy. They take it a little at a time. The first time he had a few drinks and just yelled. Maria didn't react or protest. The second time he lets himself push her. She doesn't react. The third time he tries to kick her if she doesn't protest by running away or fighting back. But one day they'll get to the point where her husband will kill her and wonder why the wife didn't fight back for real. Do you see how this works? Asked his father's words when they were already seated at his favorite fast food place. At that moment, a man sitting at a neighboring table stood up and approached them. Hello, I'm sorry to bother you. I assume this is your son, he asked. Yes, my son. A grandson, you might say. He has another son, but he is away. His name is Sam, and so am I. My parents are okay with creativity, said Sam and smiled. The unfamiliar man patted Sam on the shoulder and turned to Alexander Nikolaevich. I am a director. I make movies. I wanted to invite your son to the casting. He is a multifaceted person. He has several talents. One of them can be in the movie, said the man and held out his card. Thank you. We will definitely be there, said Sam and quickly grabbed the business card from his father's hands. Why else do you need a movie when you can't deal with school? Sam asked his father when the strange director had left and they were alone again. It's a chance. Daddy's chance to spin Sam. He's kind of out of the picture. But you're right about the school. I should be getting that place cleaned up. I think I'll take a look at it one of these days. I see the teachers have lost their way, especially the headmaster. I'm not even talking about the head teachers. They're still dancing, said Sam. Where did you disappear those times? When I left you at school, the teacher complained that you were running away from lessons, said the father. I've got things to do, Dad. Life isn't long enough to give decades of years to useless schooling. There they teach you to learn. And a person needs other skills to make money, to make a life and build a career, Sam said. And some skills that are not taught in school. And you yourself became such a person, thanks to what school and university made you so smart. Well, of course, I have my own merit, said my father. Dad, I'll tell you a little secret. 1,000 young people graduate from my school. University, too. But where are they now? Some get drunk, some get into other trouble. And what happens to the girls? Graduates from the same university, same department. One ends up working as an escort, the other marries a future oligarch. Why does this happen? Asked Sam. Well, it's all a personal choice of the individual, I think, said the father. If everything was a personal choice, everyone would choose the most wonderful life. Whatever is possible, if a person could choose, they wouldn't have any problems. It's just that we are not taught anywhere to think according to reality. Neither in university nor in school is it taught, said Sam. So you should be happy that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All the knowledge you need is already given to you in a ready-made form. You don't have to discover the laws of physics from scratch, discover theorems. Cosine and tangent, said the father. That's true. but it's not enough. Dad, I know dozens of those who perfectly know the laws of physics and still remember Newton's formula, but do not know at what moment to go to the chief and what arguments to convince him of a promotion or salary, said Sam. And what do you suggest? I'm completely confused, my father said when they were almost home. I'm just answering your questions. I'd like to suggest that you don't make me go to school, but take me with you more often. And we'll go to the audition together too. Will you support me? I'll write down the exact words and you'll learn them. You said the word. My God, gave me such a smart son, said Frank. Listen, if you've become so smart, why haven't you grown up to be an executive? Why do you sit in the same office for 5 years? And your salary is not enough for such a mind? Asked my father. Dad, you're smarter than me. But your salary has always been half as much as mine. Well, let's let this argument go. I'll probably disappoint you, but I won't become rich soon or not at all. Normally, wealth grows in proportion to a person's development. But for some people, the proportion is uneven. They may grow as individuals by 10 units, but financially by 1 unit. This means that their mental and personal potential is 9 times greater than the financial capacity of the surrounding reality, said the words. The theory is good, of course, but wealth doesn't hurt anyone, said the father. So it's not denied by anyone. I just want to say, Dad, as a lawyer and as Sam, I'm going to be a lot more valuable than becoming middle-income rich. There are dudes out there who are making $1 billion, but nobody really hears them. They don't know how to influence others, to change reality to their liking. And there's me, who may have $100 in my pocket, but knows how to reach 1 million people. If you judge by money, when I have $100, I will be able to influence 10 million people. That's why I'm not in a rush for financial results, Sam said. But that's it, that's enough. My mom's already calling for dinner, and I have a headache, said Dad, and interrupted Sam at the most interesting place. About the novelty of finally coming to study Sam. Why did you skip classes so many days in a row? Asked the class teacher, when Sam decided to go to school and show himself for once in the last 2 weeks. I had an honorable reason. And have you lost weight well during this time here is holding you a bouquet. It's not worthy of you, of course. But for now, it's all I can afford, said Sam. Oh, really? Said the teacher. But she accepted the flowers. Now, children, open your notebooks and write the theme of today's lesson. Man and nature. Who can say how man and nature are connected? The teacher asked. Later, when all the students had dispersed, Sam raised his hand. Sam, do you have any thoughts on this subject? She asked. Man. Nature forces a large subject-to-subject matrix between them. That means that each subject in that matrix has its own interests, and those interests are honored by evolutionary and social convention. If they are violated, we observe a disruption in the matrix. In other words, natural disasters and human tragedies. Tell me, please, what should man do to correct the current failures of the matrix? Asked Sam. You're good. You get 5 for your answer. And we will discuss the questions. Later, the teacher replied, not wanting to get into Sam's answers. Meanwhile, Sam took the teacher's attention away from himself and spent the rest of the lesson whispering with his new friends. After hearing the latest news from them, he promised everyone that a new carefree life would soon come. On Sam's initiative. Aunt Alice, I tell you so much about my father, but never showed him to you, said Sam at their next meeting. So you said he'll be back from his trip soon. We'll see him then. If he wants to, Alice said. Would you marry him? Sam asked. And Elise laughed. Why do you always have adult questions in your head? Getting married is not like going out for bread. You have to get to know a person better, talk to them for a while, look at them in different circumstances. And only then, if both of them have the same goals for life, you can talk about marriage, Alice said. And it's complicated in your women's heads. You had better heed my advice. There is a very simple way to check a man. If suddenly someone speaks ill of him, you don't want to believe it. Even if he says he's bad, you want to say he's good. If a man like that comes along, you can take him. It's the same with a man. If someone tells him that you are not good, and he will not believe it, then you can be with him for life, said Sam. Wow, that's interesting. How do you know these things? Asked Alice with interest. It's my personal experience. The other day I was sitting in my office waiting for you. The cleaning lady was cleaning your office. And when she saw the candy wrappers on the floor, she called you a bad word. I couldn't stand it. Went up to her and said that your actually very nice wrapper fell on the floor just by accident. If it had been me, I'd have thought you weren't. And I just thought that even if a man is not a race, he can be asked not to do it. That's it, said Sam. God, you're such a smart ass. I can't imagine what it's like to live with you. You could be followed around with a camera and record everything. Or do I have to follow you around with pen and paper like the ancient thinkers? It'll be a compendium of little Sam's wisdom, said Alice and stroked his head. If you're so interested, I can come live with you, said Sam. Alice laughed again. I would be very happy, and your parents won't report me to the police for kidnapping. She asked. There's a more complicated way, but it's reliable. I'll go to the police and declare that under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, I can use juvenile justice. I'll be taken to an orphanage and then declare that you are and apply for adoption with all the red tape. I'll be 18 by then, but I don't think I'd go for that. It's immoral. And a person has to keep a moral framework every day, Sam said. Alice laughed continuously. And the good thing is to ask your parents for a couple of days, no way. If you want, I'll go with you and say I'll take you on a field trip, Alice suggested. Well, since it's such an interesting offer, maybe I'll start by trying to work it out myself. When are we going? Asked Sam businesslike. This weekend we can go, said Alice. It's a deal. And then I'll stay with you tonight. Aren't you afraid to sleep with strange men? Asked Sam. And Alice laughed again. Frank, hello. You have a call from the police. Is Sam your son? They asked Sam's dad on the phone. Yes. What happened? He was scared. You need to bring your son to the station to testify. Details are on the spot. Waiting for you, said the policeman. Sam was just packing her backpack for a trip with Alice. A frightened mother burst into his room. Sam, what have you done? Is that where they call you to the police station? Asked the mother. Dad, calm your wife down, please. And remind her that her son is a licensed attorney, not some lazy teenager. If he's called to the police station, that means he'll be deciding someone's fate, said Sam. Did you turn the school principal into the police? Asked the mother again. The investigation will determine that. Is the principal, the head teacher, or the parents to blame? I did the main thing. All the mess I saw in the school leaked to social networks, created a resonance. Apparently, the competent authorities reacted. So we avoided a lot of trouble in the future. Mom's not staying late. Dad, are you ready to come with me? Or are you finally going to let me go alone? Sam asked. I'll go with you. Just tell me the truth. You didn't do anything wrong back there. You're a lawyer yourself. I hope you realize that such antics, as then, in your first childhood, will bring us a lot of problems. Father begged. Oh, that's it. You grown-ups are no good. I'll go myself. Stay at home, pray to God, and shiver further. And your son went to do justice, said Sam and headed for the exit. The parents followed him. There were many parents at the police station. As soon as they saw Sam, they pounced on his parents with accusations. What is your son doing? He slanders everyone. The little shameful bastards. We should expel him from the school altogether. Where did he come from? Aren't you ashamed to raise such a schemer? They shouted. One of the policemen took Sam into his office and he came out after a couple of hours. In that time, Sam's parents had a little more gray hair on their heads, and the angry parents were also dispersed to different offices. But I had done my job. Let's go home, Sam said. What was that all about? Why all the fuss? Asked the mother. I met all the boys in my class the first day I came to this school. A few of them stood out. They were Stas, Yura, and Dinama. I talked to them and concluded that they were psychologically depressed. I followed them after class. And what do you think? They went straight for the garages on the next block. High school kids were waiting for them, extorting money from them. I secretly videotaped the whole thing. After the incident, I approached the boys and asked if they wanted me to help them. They tearfully asked me not to tell anyone about it, as the extortionists threatened them and managed to intimidate them. Then I started making inquiries about the extortionists. One of them turned out to be the son of the head teacher, the other of the educational director. The third was the son of some local official. That's when I realized that I couldn't deal with them alone. When I collected all the evidence, I leaked the video on social media, even sent it to the Minister of Security. That was in the morning. They responded immediately. Well done to the parents of the hooligans, and they themselves received a serious warning. And those boys will now be under the scrutiny of their teachers. Justice has been served, Sam said. But how will you study there now? The principal and the vice principal won't let you stay there any longer. They will press you, said the mother. Well, then we'll have to go to the police offices one more time. There's a penalty for that too. Anyway, enough with the gloomy thoughts. Let's go to a pizza place. I haven't had pizza in a long time, said Sam. He and his father struck hands, while his mother kept reciting a prayer. That's how they sat down at the table. I should have made Suryoga some chicken broth today, and that we have lately had a neighbor full of another neighbor. When Sam went out into the yard to chase crows and climb trees. Hello, he said hello to the woman. Stopped in front of her for a few moments and walked on. Hello, boy. Who are you? I haven't seen you here before? Asked Nicole. I'm Sam's son. My name is Sam. I recently moved in, said Sam and walked on. Where'd you come from? I don't remember them having such a small son. The neighbor asked. I'm just a bastard child. I recently won the right to live with my family in court, and now I've moved in with them by court order. Said the woman was dumbfounded by the answer. Sam noticed and laughed. I'm kidding. If possible, I should try to be closer to the neighbors to communicate sometimes. If anything, drop in on us. Sam said and walked away. Nicole walked on. Sam turned around and saw a thin woman barely carrying 2 bags in her hands. Can I help you? Asked Sam. You're too young. You can't handle it, replied the neighbor. But I'll help anyway, Sam said and looked around. His gaze fell on a young guy who was hanging around his car. Hey bro, there's a woman carrying heavy bags, and I'm too small to help her carry them. Maybe you will, and I'll get even with you somehow, Sam said. Hearing the boy's businesslike tone, the boy smiled, silently walked over to Nicole, and carried both bags on or followed him. That's it, thank you. Thank goodness I live on the first floor, she said. When they reached their destination, the guy turned around and walked away. Nicole, and not in a hurry, opened the door with her key, and was immediately surprised to see an empty couch in the living room, where her husband usually lies on and looks at the door waiting for his wife. 3 weeks since he had suffered a minor injury at work and was now on sick leave. Nicole carried the bags into the kitchen. The first thing she did was pull out a whole chicken and set the broth to simmer. Then she decided to look for her husband around the apartment. He was not in the kitchen, in the hall on the balcony, where he occasionally looked in. And when she came to the bedroom door, he was stunned by the nasal sounds of feminine moans. Before she opened the door, Nicole took a seat on the couch in the living room. Her whole life flashed before her eyes. She and her husband had started everything from scratch. Then the children came along and they had to raise them together, then plow through 2-3 jobs together to give them a good education. And now the children have finished their institutes, found their places in life, and the parents are left alone. Recently, their daughter called them and promised that on the 30th anniversary of the marriage of her parents, she and her husband are preparing a surprise. And the grandson then issued that for the surprise, they are waiting for a trip to some romantic islands. Nicole then thanked fate and looked fondly at her husband, lying with a cast on his leg. Her husband, Robert, who had never been used to idleness before, suffered greatly from the fact that now he had to spend his days in front of the television. He was bored staying home alone. Why don't you at least get me a nanny if you don't want to give up at least one job and be home more? He said that the other day. No, I really love my job. Teaching music is my lifelong passion. I can't imagine my life without music and children. If there is a third school that needs a music teacher, I would be willing to work there too, she said then. Now Nicole realized that at that time her husband was not joking. He should have listened. And in general, there is no trust in these men. As soon as they find a reason, so immediately left. and sometimes they don't even need a reason. So out of boredom, like her affair? No, that's too cruel. Bringing a strange woman into your own home and having fun with her in broad daylight. It means all their journey together is worthless. It means he's been living with her in a fake life, but his soul is elsewhere all the time. What's more hurtful, unloving or betrayal? That or did it not matter anymore? She took out her cell phone and texted her husband just a few words. "I'm filing for divorce. There's no going back." Then she put the phone aside and headed for the exit. As she walked down the stairs, she couldn't hide her emotions. First tears flowed, and all the pain and resentment in her chest turned into bitter sobs. Her gaze immediately fell on a bench near the playground. She went there and sat down on the edge of one bench to cry enough so that no one would hear or see. As soon as she sat down, the silence was broken by a familiar child's voice. "Is there something wrong at home?" asked the joking boy who had just introduced himself as the illegitimate son of his parents. "Yes, you could say that," she replied. "Alcohol is probably like Maria's floor above," asked Sam. "No, my husband hasn't been drinking for a long time. It's something else. You're too old to know. You'll find out when you grow up," said the neighbor. "It makes sense." "So it's cheating," Sam said. The woman stopped crying. I was surprised again. Sam continued talking. Men do it for different reasons. Some out of curiosity, some out of boredom, some just for fun. But they all regret it. When the family code comes into play, Sam said, "How does it work?" asked the woman. "It works in a sobering way. If you want, I'll paint you the prospects of property division in a divorce for adultery, one of the spouses. Then you sit down with your husband in a calm environment and tell him everything," said Sam, and began to tell his professional story. When he finished his consultation, the woman took her cell phone out of her pocket and word for word recited what he had said. In short, Robert was facing the poverty of homelessness and old age at a broken trough. Nicole sent the message and with peace of mind continued chatting with the boy. Until on the corner of her house, she saw her husband sitting in a wheelchair. "Wait, what's that supposed to mean?" "He's outside." "Who's in our bedroom then?" asked Nicole and wondered. "But it's late, madam. Have you already filed for divorce?" "We've divided your property. He knows everything. Now it's just remarriage," said Sam. "But I have a vague suspicion that you've jumped to conclusions. You haven't even seen it with your own eyes. Is he cheating on you?" He added, "Shit." Now at least he didn't have his cell phone on him, Nicole said and headed toward her husband. "Robert, how did you get here?" she asked, approaching him from behind. "Oh, hello, darling. I thought you were coming from the other side. I was waiting for you. Why were you at the grocery store so late again today? Looking for the best chicken and the best meat? I told you not to spoil me like that. I'm better now. I'll be back at work next week," Robert said. "No, you tell me. How did you end up on the street? Who pulled you out and where's your cell phone?" Nicole asked. "I think I left my phone in the apartment. A friend of mine helped me out. It was his day off today, and he and his friend Olsia decided to visit me. They asked me what I wanted. So I honestly said that I would like to get some fresh air. They took me out, and they're sitting at home waiting for you. I turned on the TV for them," Robert answered. Nicole knelt down in front of her husband and hugged him. "Are they in the bedroom?" she asked. "Well, yes, they must have had a few drinks. Let them rest. I authorized it myself," Robert said. Sam winked at the neighbor and went on his way. "Mom, tell Dad not to call every hour. I'm an adult, after all. I have a personal life, among other things. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow," said Sam and hung up. "Where is he, anyway? Where is he going to spend the night?" asked excitedly Frank. "He said at the girls'," said the mother in a whisper. "What girl?" laughed the father. "You're laughing, but he's been having a pen pal affair with some Alice. From what I understand, she's crazy about him. So there you go. Your son was impossible to ask for any bride in his adult life. And when he became a child, he was a catcher," said the mother. Meanwhile, Sam was the happiest man going on a day trip with Alice. "Do you really not have a boyfriend? Or do you just don't want to upset me by talking about him?" he asked on the way out. To be honest, he's gone. After I saw you, after I listened to your childishly smart advice, I realized I was just fooling myself. Looking at your directness, I realized how important it is to be honest with others and with yourself. So I put an end to a failed relationship. I told Alice. You did the right thing, said Sam and patted her on the shoulder. And my dad would never cheat on you, he added, looking out the window. By the way, when is he coming at last? You've told me so much about him. I can't wait to see him, Alice said. He's very sensitive, and he's coming after a momentous occasion. Of course, you could influence this event, but I don't know. We'll see about that. It's a sensitive issue, Sam said. Show me his picture, asked Alice suddenly, but finally. Because I thought you'd never ask for it. Look how he is, said Sam and showed his picture from his former life. He's cute. I feel like I've seen him before, said Alice. No wonder. He told me that he was purposefully dreaming about you at night, so that fate would unite your life paths. You've seen him in your dreams. He's your dream. That's how you know him, said Sam, and they laughed. Would you want a son like that? I asked Sam later. But I think no one could refuse a son like you. What are your plans? Do you want to leave your parents and become my son? Alice asked. No, you could really have a son like me. If you and my father work out, you just please be honest with him, said Sam. But either way, you and I will remain friends, said Alice. Not that it'll last. Oh, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something more interesting. Women or men? I love gossip, Sam said and sat down. Come closer. Throughout the journey, Sam entertained Alice with his witty phrases. As always, he had the goal of making Alice fall in love with the image of an adult Sam, who could come back if she loved him. After the tour, Alice was going to walk her little friend home, and we had a different arrangement. You promised I'd stay the night at your place. Was it for nothing? Did I make a deal with my parents? I remembered Sam. Oh, okay, just for one night. I've never been around little kids after all. I'm just worried, said Alice. Alice had noticed since the morning that her little friend was always looking away, looking nervously at his phone. He answers someone briefly and drops someone else's calls. In short, he can't tear himself away from his phone. One of these conversations took place with Andrew. Sam, hey kid. So when can we expect your dad? I already told Vanessa. She's getting ready to be assigned to another company, and we're expecting your dad instead. What kind of irresponsible attitude is that? How can a businessman be so careless? He was indignant. Andrew, everything is almost solved. How about appointing me in his place for now? I can handle his duties. That I promise you, Sam told him. No, don't make me laugh. You better tell your daddy I'm willing to wait another week for him. If he shows up, let him take over. And if not, then let him go on with his dark deeds. That's what he said. And then Paul called several times. He was already in the city and hurried to meet his old friend. At the same time, they were going to discuss the details of their business together. But even then, they had to work around it. Kid, I don't recognize my friend. How come he gave his cell phone to someone and then disappeared? It's all very strange, he said into the phone. If you're his real friend, you should understand and believe him. He's got one last task left. As soon as he does it, he'll show up right away. You please, show some more patience and wait for him. I convinced Sam. Who are you to him? A nephew, I guess? Asked Paul. No, I'm his son. He just didn't tell anyone. I made sure everyone knew. But he and I have been in close contact all this time, and I know everything he does. Said Sam. What a surprise. So many years of being friends with a man and not even a hint of a baby. Baby. I'd love to get to know you too. But you better hurry up, 'cause the big people have their hopes up. It's no good keeping them waiting. Paul said goodbye. Yeah, sending my father in his place won't work this time. Better to seek rescue from Alice, Sam concluded. And with renewed vigor, he began to conquer her. Now the lady must rest, and the gentleman will take care of the surprise. What would you like for dinner? Asked Sam, when they finally reached Alice's apartment. Can't we just order a cooked meal and watch cartoons? Suggested Alice. And when you have a husband, will you also offer to order cooked food and watch soccer with him? Asked Sam. Alice laughed again until her stomach cramped. Sam, for all the time I've known you, you have asked me so many questions about my non-existent husband and about my relationship with him that I even feel married and with a child like you. How do you manage it all? She asked. I just really see you as a good wife and mother. And do you mind? He asked. To be honest, I'd like that too. But I'm trying not to be starry-eyed. You have to be realistic. There is no such person who just one-in-one guesses your wishes and all the time on the same wavelength with you. Adults are more complicated. They can change their minds at any time. And the worst part is not telling you about it, Alice said sadly. My dad's not like that. He's in over his head, said Sam. Everyone thinks so. Why do you live? By everyone's standards, you're centered on yourself. Because I've noticed. Do you want to fit in with the general rules? Like, do you want pure love? But I've been trying to prove to you all this time that if a person is interesting to you, and you to him, it's easy to grow and nurture love on such soil, and you adults do the opposite. First, you cultivate love in your head, and then with closed eyes you look for points of contact in a person. And maybe he wasn't there in the first place. Finding the real truth. Disappointing, said Sam. What are you getting at? I sometimes lose the thread of the conversation. My point is that you have a better chance of building a strong relationship with my dad because I'm already building an image of him in your head. You already have an idea of him, and you'll notice that I'm not hiding the fact that he has his faults. For example, he likes to have fun like me in a childish way because it helps him regain his energy. And so when you see him, try to trust and love him. He will love you for sure. You will be happy forever. Then, if you want, you can have a son like me. If you want, you can have 2 or 3 or 4, all of them like me. That's great, said Sam and winked with one eye. Listen, you talk so much about your dad. I can't wait to see him. How about we call him on the video now and talk to him? Alice suggested. Sam got excited. It seemed his goal was close at hand. He crossed his fingers behind his back and prayed to God. There is an easier way. He can appear before you tonight or tomorrow morning. Only for that you have to do something, said Sam. What? Asked Alice. Well, kiss me, for example. Alice laughed again. You leftist. Strangers don't kiss strangers. It's just unethical. But that doesn't mean I'm mean to you. It's just that boundaries and distance is good for everyone. Alice said as she made up the bed in the living room. She then tucked her little friend in, put her teddy bear next to him, and retired to her room. Alice got up early in the morning to take the stranger's child to his house on time. She went into the kitchen to make herself some coffee, but when she saw the picture, she almost fainted. Sam was lying face down on the floor. He had a small paper in his hand. Alice ran to him, turned him over on his back, and started shaking him. But there was no reaction. She took the paper and once again was shocked by the writing. I have no reason to live in a world of such sentiments of adults. She wrapped her arms around his head and started crying. I'm sorry, baby, how could you do this? Why did I have to suffer such grief? What will I tell your parents? I'm sorry if I hurt you in any way. Just open your eyes. You have to live. You're gonna be fine, Sam. Open your eyes. God, what have you done? Fussing. She's wiping the tears from her face. A few minutes later, the ambulance she managed to call arrived. The doctor examined the boy and was surprised. All his vitals were normal. Maybe it's just a person sleeping so soundly. But just in case, we are taking him to the ward, he said. The other took Sam in an armful and put him on a stretcher. Alice went out after them, and lastly decided to address her friend once more. She walked over to the supposedly unconscious Sam and placed her cheek against his cheek. His cheeks felt warm. Then she gently kissed his forehead and whispered in his ear, I will be by your side no matter what happens. You'll come to your senses very soon and you won't do anything stupid again. Guys, let's go to the clinic, the doctor said. And you lady, if you want, you can follow us, he added. Wait, I'll stay. There was a voice from the ambulance cab. Someone knocked from inside. It was Sam. Thank you all for your attention, but I'm better now. I have to run an errand, he said. Nimbly jumped off the stretcher and ran away. Well, there you go, lady. You shouldn't have bothered us for nothing. The kid decided to play a trick on you because he's just a kid. The fine for a false call will have to be paid by you, the doctor said, turning to Alice. Paul, how long can we wait for you? You've been in my city for a week and you still haven't met me. Come on, come out to your friend. He is waiting for you under the window, said Sam on the phone. Paul came out a couple minutes later. They hugged and greeted each other. What are you doing out on the street like that? Let's go home and we have a lot to talk about, said Paul. Listen, where the hell have you been? But that boy who was carrying your phone is a smart one. He was doing a great job as your assistant. He was even willing to take over for you. Who introduced him to me? Paul asked. First things first. Yes, I will as soon as he is born, said Sam and smiled enigmatically. So here's the conversation. We're all set. Opening in a couple weeks while the office is getting ready, final touches are coming. You and I will go there now and meet Mark tonight. He'll sign the order appointing you. That's the end of the story. By the way, what about personal? We have a traditional approach to our image. You should think about getting married. It'll give you credibility in Mark's eyes. Anyway, it's time you and I made up our minds, Paul said. I'm ready to get married. I just have to ask a young lady to marry me. Or maybe wait until she offers it to me. Sam said thoughtfully. The meeting with Mark. That evening. Sam had really impressed him. The arrangements had been made. All that remained now was to get down to business. When Sam was finally on his way to his apartment with peace of mind, the bell rang. Sam, where are you going? Are they asking you at school? Can they expel you if you don't show up? A month of truancy. That's no joke. Stop what you're doing and get to school, said Frank. Dad, tell them that your son has decided to skip school and go straight into a career and the family doesn't need to pretend anymore, said Sam. It happened. Congratulations. Who's the sorceress? Frank asked, when he realized his son was an adult again. About the rest. Then Dad to Mom and say hi and wait for news from me. All bye, he said lastly and started dialing another phone number. Sam, you're elusive. Where the hell have you been? Maybe the kid will go to lead instead of you. And you are going to hide. Andrew replied threateningly. Vanessa's place has been vacant for a week now. She's moving to another company. When are you ready to start? He asked. Andrew, thank you very much for your trust in my person, but I decided to go elsewhere, said Sam. But I'm very grateful. And to Vanessa for mentoring me too. We're not saying goodbye. I'll always be in touch. And expect a wedding invitation from me soon, said Sam. Oh, there it is. Well, if this is the way it's going to turn out, it's all for the best, said the former boss. Sam went to his apartment, put it in perfect order, and enjoyed his life. How good it is when you don't have to make up anything, tell everyone everything as it is. And yes, my adult life wasn't so bad, he wrote in his journal a couple minutes before there was a knock on the door. He went to open the door, and there was a girl standing there who looked painfully familiar. Hello, you must be Sam's dad. I'm his girlfriend. He was just a little sick this morning, and I've been worried about him all day. I wanted to visit him, so I baked his favorite pie, the girl said shyly. Well, hello, Alice. Come in. Is your friend waiting for you? Said Sam and smiled. Alice was nervous and fussed the same daddy Sam. Really turned out to be so gallant, courteous, and interesting, as that little boy described. To keep the conversation going, Sam had to tell the whole story. Alice laughed. She was indignant. She was surprised. But in the end, she was convinced that it was a wonderful story. I was really from beginning to end. So there was no such boy. But I grew attached to him. He convinced me that my son would be just like him. And I believed in that reality. I told Alice sadly. He was telling the truth. Such a Sam can indeed appear, but he can only appear with you and me. I would like that very much. Are you ready to go with me in life, to raise our children and admire them? Asked Sam, kneeling down. I'm looking forward to it, replied Alice. A few days later, all the people close to Sam finally waited for news from him. Each of them received an invitation to the wedding, and the young barely had time to prepare for the event. On the one hand, the opening of a new company where Sam is the head. On the other hand, a gathering of loved ones, pleasant troubles, But in moments of fatigue, the bride and groom remembered their goal about little Slavic, and all the fatigue vanished at once.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Is this what an evening board meeting looks like now? Emily greeted her husband's secretary at the office door with an unkind smile as she gasped for breath, buttoning her blouse. "Let me pass, my dear." Like an impending thunderstorm, she walked into the office of her husband, who, with one hand hastily removed from the desk the effects of recent passion, and pulled on pants. "Can I help you? Is it cold?" Emily asked, folding her arms across her chest. Everything inside her was standing, burning, and resentful. This man, on whom she had spent 10 years of her life, oblivious to her own dreams and ambitions, now stood before her with his pants half pulled down and could not utter a word. "Emily." No comment. She interrupted him. "How was it?" "By all accounts, the director's meeting went well." "Emily, stop it. I can explain everything." He finally buckled his belt and moved toward her. "Stay where you are," abruptly cried out the girl from the surprised trader, froze in place. "What for?" His eyebrows drew together. "Don't make a scene." I wanted to throw tantrums, and I wanted to vent my anger on him, but my natural restraint got the better of me. "I'll wait for you at home." She turned on her heels and walked out of the office with her head held high. Here she was at last. "Are you going to cook dinner at all?" Miranda's mother-in-law was very kind. She met Emily in the lobby. "While David's plowing, you're driving around to your friends." Yes, David really earned it on his own. Emily looked at the 60-year-old woman, just on fire at work. "What?" Her mother-in-law's eyebrows rose indignantly. "Tell your son when he comes home that I'm waiting for him upstairs, and someone else will take care of dinner tonight." And Emily, with a short nod, headed for the stairs. My mother-in-law was taken aback. She looked after her daughter-in-law, who had never allowed herself such liberties before today. It had been 3 years since Miranda had moved into her son's house under the pretext of hypertension, and she had never been spoken to in that tone before. What kind of fly bit her? It's a worthless girl. The daughter of the school German teacher. Never liked her. And once David got the idea to marry her, well, they met at the institute, fell in love, and then broke up, looking for a mate from her circle. How Miranda dreamed of marrying David to the daughter of her crony friend, the Harris of the jewelry business. Instead, her son married this homeless beggar, and even a red degree in design didn't make her a more attractive match, finding herself in her room. Emily collapsed on the bed and closed her eyes. More resentment flooded her tears, rolling from her eyes on their own. She had been almost as hurt when her mother had died. She had burned so quickly that the girl hadn't had time to say goodbye to her properly. It had been 2 years since that terrible day when, holding her only daughter's hand, that heroic woman left the world, for Emily did not know her father. Her mother said he died before she was born. She had no more relatives left in the world. Wendy pulled her along on her meager teacher's salary. While Emily was in school and in her first year of college, she supplemented her main job with part-time tutoring and scrubbing floors at the local supermarket. Sometimes her daughter wouldn't see her for days. She would come home, exhausted, tired. But she never complained about life. She had no men, although quite a few suitors tried to take the vacant place next to her. The woman was intelligent, beautiful, and lonely. Emily knew that her father was her only love, whose fidelity she kept all her life, sometimes falling into a longing for her mother. The girl dialed her home phone number and listened to the long, dull ringing tone. And now she was 30 years old. No kids, no job, and now no husband. Emily knew she would never be able to forgive this betrayal to him. Truth be told, their marriage had been bursting at the seams for a long time. They married for mutual love right after university. 3 months later, David's father died, and her husband inherited a lucrative construction and landscaping business. He then made it clear to her that she had to quit the job Emily had taken in her 3rd year and take care of her home and not think about any career. At the time, it seemed to her that this was fair, and she willingly plunged into the family hassle with the hope that soon there will be children, but they did not appear. All the necessary examinations and procedures were done. They even began to consider their options, but everything changed in an instant. Miranda came into their home, and Emily stopped feeling like the master of her own life. Yes, she still made repairs, planted flowers in the garden, and cooked crazy lunches and dinners, a server and a chair like in Lennon's restaurant. Except that the feeling of safety and security was no longer there. Emily stood up from her bed and wiped away the tears flowing in a waterfall. She looked at the clock on the bed on the nightstand. The hand showed 9:00 p.m. To get her mind off herself and relax a little, she headed for the shower. Barely a girl threw off her clothes and turned on the water. The front door slammed on the floor below. Damn it, we have to hurry, she thought, and just in case, she clicked the lock on the door as well. While Emily stood under the hot streams, her thoughts slowly came to order. The sobs subsided, and she put a terry towel over her ear and threw on a robe. She stepped out of the shower. The bedroom was still empty. Emily walked over to the mirror, where a slender, brown-haired woman with a mole above her lip was looking at her. A short, trimmed leading hair picturesquely framed her flippers, her face. Opening her closet, she pulled out jeans and a t-shirt and turned into them and left the room. There was no one in the hall, the living room, or the kitchen, so no one had come. That Miranda was out for the night, probably on a broomstick, Emily thought, and grinned bitterly. In the living room, she walked over to the antique sideboard, where her pride, a magnificent service made of the finest medical porcelain, was displayed. She had bought it during her honeymoon in the German town of Worms. David wondered at the time why you couldn't buy that kind of junk instead of carrying it halfway across Europe. But beautiful tableware, especially vintage ones, was Emily's passion. Now she would have to leave it all behind, for David would probably not let her take anything. Not because he needs it. It's just the way he is. There were footsteps in the hallway, and the next second she heard Emily's husband's voice. "You're the one." How she wanted to throw something at him. "I'm right here." She turned to him. "I want to explain, don't I?" He started to ramble as he sat down on the couch. "Come here, please." He pointed to the armchairs beside her. Emily went silently and sat down in the place indicated. She wanted to look him in the eye, to ask why. But she silently stared at the newspaper lying on the coffee table. She just did not have the strength to look at him. "You'll stay silent." His voice suddenly sounded irritated. "Really? You're not going to ask him anything? Or don't you care?" She finally found the strength to look at him. She saw a strange man standing in front of her. "Ask me what?" She grinned. "When did it begin?" "I'm guessing, because your evening meetings and business trips started exactly 3 months ago. Maybe earlier, though." "What's her name?" "I know that too. Helen. I think I know that she's 23. But you know the reason." David leaned back and put one hand on the back of the couch, showing he wasn't embarrassed. "I'm at a loss for ideas." Her voice trembled treacherously, but she pulled herself together. "Yes, because you've become so boring you want to forget. You're always in the kitchen or running around and taking your stupid China junk. Damn it, there's nothing to talk to you about except your pink tastes and your girlfriend's shoes. You only have wacky maiden, a tank with a curious nose and a sharp tongue." Maiden tank would not like it, Emily thought. She listened, and anger boiled in her soul with resentment. The girl could not utter a word, though she should have reminded this man that she had sacrificed a successful career, the dream of one day opening her own business for the sake of their marriage. About the fact that for 3 years now she had tolerated in the house his bored and selfish mother, who tried in every way to humiliate her. "Have you finished even?" Emily asked. Only her tightly pressed lips, which defeated her knuckles, indicated that she was very tense. "No," he was quiet for a second. "Helen is 5 weeks pregnant. to be exact. I think Mom will be happy she's finally going to have a grandchild or granddaughter. He spoke in such a casual tone, as if they were discussing a menu, a named lunch. It was a punch in the gut. Emily closed her eyes and tears ran down her cheeks. What a bastard you are. How could I have lived with you for so many years and not notice it as much as I could? His words literally exuded venom. My darling, 2 years of a relationship and 8 years of marriage have made you a woman of high society, a rich woman. You know very well how much your pastime is worth. Besides, you escaped the poverty that you and your mother ate your one bedroom with the alcoholic neighbors behind the wall. After this phrase, Emily could not stand it and stood forward and slapped him with a resounding slap. Oh, you bitch. The retaliatory slap was immediate, and Emily fell into a black abyss. In the morning, she called the only person she had left close to her after her mother left and David betrayed her. Hi, Evelyn. Emily tried her best to make her voice sound smooth and relaxed, but it still shook. We'll be able to meet right away today. What's the matter? Her friend's anxious voice made her smile. It happened, and I really need to talk to you. Of course, I'm getting dressed now. Evelyn's dark glasses raised the precipice in surprise when they met a couple of hours later at their favorite coffee shop. This was new, considering that it was raining outside. Emily sat down across from her and silently removed her glasses. Her friend's eyes were red and bruised. My mother's woman. What is it? Emily, from where? From there, the girl answered dryly. Life is changing, people are changing. Or opens up, maybe. Is it really David? Emily took a deep breath and told Evelyn. Yesterday's story meant that she was pregnant. She flopped down in her chair and looked intently at her friend. What are you going to do? Forgive him. If you do, I'll interrupt you myself. Emily averted her eyes and looked outside, where we had a dreary October rain. Leaving. How can you live with a man who betrayed you, who dared to raise his hand? But you sue him for his part of the estate. Evelyn popped another sugar cube into her latte. This whole thing makes even me stressed out. I don't think I'm going to make it. Yesterday, when I woke up from his slap, she hobbled off. My beautiful spouse informed me that I was leaving home with what I came in with. That is, as you understand, without everything. He did, however, allow me to take some clothes and some jewelry that he had given me. The car, of course, remains in the future wife and mother of his child. That's exactly what he said. What a bastard. Don't worry. We'll figure something out with the job. The most important thing is to leave this bastard with dignity. By the way, you can move in with me. Emily gave her a paved smile. Thank you, sweetheart. But I'll go back to my mom's apartment. But nobody's lived there for years. Can you imagine what's there now? That's where Mom is. She's there in everything in the books, on the shelf, in the picture frames in the air. And it's the only place in the whole world where I want to be right now. Really, she herself didn't notice the tears flowing from her eyes. Evelyn simply held her hand in silence as she mourned her pain and resentment. Finally, Emily resolutely wiped her tears away with her palms and smiled weakly. So stop feeling sorry for yourself. She clapped her hands on her hips. Let's ask for the bill. You don't have to go to the apartment and clean it up. I'll go with you, of course. But you have work to do. I'll ask right now. Evelyn, with her chowder pen, pulled out the latest iPhone from the bowels of her bag and dialed her boss's number. Thank you, silently, Emily whispered as she made up a story to her boss about her sore throat and the beginning of her fever. They brought the bill and the girls. Relaxed, they headed for the exit. The front door lock barely clicked, and a streak of light fell on the hallway floor. Emily became agitated. She hadn't been here much since her mother's death, and now she felt uneasy. Once inside, her friends smelled the distinctive smell of an uninhabited room. It smelled sad and empty. Emily, with a familiar motion, turned on the light and walked into the kitchen. Evelyn followed her. It was, as always, clean, and the back of the kitchen set, a gift from her son-in-law for his anniversary, and slightly ruined by dust. It was practically empty except for the drawers that held the old dinner service. The refrigerator door was open, as if someone had just taken out milk, and one of the chairs had been pulled out from under the table. Emily thought she was about to hear footsteps in the hallway, and her mother would come in. They will all sit down together, as they used to, at the round table, pour tea from the soul, and talk about the little things that life really consists of. Evelyn, catching her friend's mood, broke into a loud cough and began rattling the cupboard in search of the kettle. While she was tinkering in the kitchen, Emily walked into the room. Here everything remained the same as it had been under her mother's reclining couch, dust covered with sheets. The simple but elegant wallpaper that the two of them had glued together the week before they had learned the terrible diagnosis. Emily repeatedly offered to buy her mother a flat-screen modern TV, but she always flatly refused. Apparently, Emily got her love of vintage things from her mother. She opened the dam of her closet, where her clothes were still hanging. There was no way the girl could bring herself to part with the things that held her scent. Remembering her, she took the sleeve of her blouse in her hands, held it up to her face, and breathed in the scent of the perfume her mother had always spritzed on her wrist. God, how she missed her. She was distracted from her sad thoughts by Evelyn's voice, who informed her that she had made tea. Feeling back in the kitchen, Emily found that her friend had already managed to dust off, relive the teacups, and make tea. Discovered in the tin box above the sink, the girl smiled appreciatively at the scrolls. "What would I do without you, really, what?" She shrugged, taking a chocolate bar out of her bag. "That's how I knew. Just bought it this morning in the subway." They quickly drank tea and changed into their old clothes, began to put things in order, sweeping away the newest cobwebs from the ceiling wall, fresh to the kitchen to shine, cleaned the faience and the bathroom toilet. The girls sat down to rest. The curtains remained to be taken down, and the hardest part was rubbing the books and crystal into the walls. "I'm not taking them to you now." You know what? Evelyn looked enigmatically at her friend. "What's to fall in love with?" That Emily coughed in surprise. "Is that all you need?" "No, really. Do you need some good emotions right now?" The girl moved toward her friend, taking her hand. Looking into her eyes, "Worried for you." Emily shook her hand gratefully and smiled. "I can handle it. You know I'm strong. Come on, let's just get this over with." As if on cue, they both stared at the bookcases, which looked intimidating. Emily fetched a basin of warm water, and they, armed with rags, began carefully removing books from the shelves, wiping and dusting off another spine of the bindings. She smiled to herself. Her mother had amassed a whole library. It had everything, and Emily never had to look elsewhere for works from the school curriculum. Wendy had a special love for German literature. Hoffmann, Grass, Remarque, even Patrick Suskind, and even Goethe and his Faust, and Emily herself, thanks to her mother, knew almost by heart. Evelyn was humming something about herself, carrying a tray with volumes of War and Peace. Behind her, an impressive pile of dust-free folios had already landed. She was doing everything clearly and quickly, unlike her friend. Emily, on the other hand, was in a strange nirvana, giving herself to the memories that held the pages of these old and beloved books. She searched with her eyes for Goethe. It was a large antique book in German, dated 1896, and appeared in the house before Emily herself. Taking it in her hands, the girl felt a strange thrill. The yellowed pages were decrepit and soft. Somewhere along the stretches of time, she stroked the roughness and surface. Suddenly, she felt that there was something among the pages. She flipped through them with her fingers and saw a small envelope wedged between pages 50 and 51. Carefully taking it in her hands, Emily felt that in the envelope there was something hard and heavy in addition to the paper. Her hands were sweating with excitement. She looked at Evelyn, who paid no attention to her, and pondered. To tell her or not, it must be about her family. Finally, she made up her mind. "Evelyn, come here for a minute." Evelyn was distracted by the cleaning of the bindings and headed toward her friend. "What have you got here?" "Wow," she glanced at the envelope. "And what is this letter?" Emily shrugged her shoulders. I do not know. Well, I'll open it then, Lord. Evelyn stood sideways at her arm and looked at her friend with a look as if she were a little girl. Emily nodded and opened the envelope. There was a folded piece of paper and a small gold ring with a blue stone. Wow! Evelyn jumped up and down, and with excitement Emily, completely unaware of anything, stared blankly at the piece of jewelry. She saw it for the first time and wondered where it had come from. After all, she and her mother had never had any secrets from each other. The stone was shimmering in the artificial light of the chandelier with 1,000 facets, and it looked like a real diamond. But where did the German teacher get the diamond ring? Emily was utterly confused. She and Evelyn sat down on the sofa and stared at the strange find. On the inside, there was a short inscription in German, A-S-H-A. A-S-H-A, what is A-S-H-A? Where did it come from? Oh, look, Emily. Evelyn pointed to a small badge on the same inside of the seer under the very stone. It was either a hallmark or a coat of arms. Well, very finely engraved. There's a magnifying glass. Emily perplexed at her friend. Well, to increase, seeing her confusion, explained it. Although wait, she stood up abruptly and rushed into the hallway. And a second later, she was already taking pictures of the ring on her iPhone camera. She took a few pictures and then enlarged the image as much as possible. In front of her eyes was a drawing of Rose braiding a dagger on a shield. From the looks of it, it appears to be an antique ring, Emily stated. There's no modern hallmark here. I wonder where Aunt Wendy got it. I don't know, said the girl thoughtfully. Suddenly, she remembered the piece of paper that was in the same envelope. When she unfolded it, she gasped. Her mother's handwriting. It was a letter written in German. In the upper left corner, Emily made out the floor, alas, flowery lines with an address. Germany, Rhine City, Trier, Beverly Strasse, 28A, Schwarzenberg. Holding her breath, Emily began to read you to thank God for diligently learning German under the guidance of the best teacher in the world. Dear Alex, I am writing you a letter again, which will probably remain in my books again. And I apologize in advance. I am very guilty before you, but I could not do otherwise. Believe me, I am punished in full, for being away from you is the greatest pain of my life. There's a lot you don't know. Maybe it's for the best. Otherwise, you would still be trying to find me. I really want you to be happy with love. Wendy, September 5, the year 2000. Emily was silent. Tears flowed from her eyes. Wendy, what was writing? Was it a love letter? She simply did not know. Evelyn's sobbing distracted her from her thoughts. Her friend's eyes were wet too. How romantic was that? Emily. Who's Alex? Your mom's boyfriend. She never told me about it, did she? I was 10 when she wrote that letter. My dad died before I was born. Maybe they met later. Mom loved Dad very much. She never looked at anyone else. Who is this mysterious Alex anyway? Evelyn shrugged, and Emily wondered. The letter said it wasn't the first one written or sent. Maybe there are others to be found. In the books. Let's look. The cleaning can wait. It took them 3 hours. It had long been dark outside. The rain outside the windows had turned into a downpour, but there were 2 more letters on the table in front of them. One was found in Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. With trembling hands, Emily unfolded the first leaf. It was 5 years older. It was the same address. The handwriting was her mother's, too, but it was more fluid. The scribbles. She could tell a young girl had written it. It's been another year without you, my love. I can't bear to think of you so far away. Another woman beside you. I know your mother dreamed of this wedding, but what anguish did her dreams cost me? Don't look for me. I lost myself a long time ago. Forever yours, Wendy. Emily finished reading, and there was an awkward silence. Now I don't understand anything at all. Baby, I lost my whiskey. 1 more year, Emily repeated. 1 more. So it was before. But how? I didn't know anything about it. My head was spinning. Read it. The second one. Evelyn fidgeted impatiently on the couch. Emily unwrapped the last letter. The handwriting became different, tired and sad. On July 20, 2018, 1 week later, her mother died. The girl closed her eyes. She was suddenly afraid of what she would read in that scrap of paper. What secret would this last message reveal to her? "My dear Alex, it is my last letter, my hopes to look into your eyes again. Alas, not destined to happen. 28 long years without you deprived me of strength and will to fight. I cannot tell you how much I regret listening to the voice of reason and others when I left your life. You may never know that I came home with a priceless gift for which I have tried to be happy all these years. This daughter of ours is the fruit of the most incredible, endless love that has forever settled in my heart. Yes, I am guilty of hiding, of running away, of disappearing from your life, of robbing you of the joy of being a father to Emily. I deprived her of a father's care and love. I realize now how foolish I've been to live my life hurting myself. You and Emily. She doesn't know anything. I don't have the strength to tell her. Forgive me and goodbye. Love of my life. Forever yours, Wendy." The girls sat in silence, staring into the void. The truth was revealed so suddenly, so harshly, that they could not find the right words. Emily struggled to comprehend what she had read as recently as yesterday morning. She was quietly baking cookies in her country kitchen. Everything in life was certain, clear, and predictable. No secrets, no cheating, no letters. It seemed like years had flown by since that moment. So what should I do? Emily broke the silence. She ran her hands over the priceless pieces of paper that preserved the secret of her birth. Evelyn took her hands and looked at her friend Emily seriously. "Do you realize what you have just learned? You have learned that you have a real father who does not know about you. What is there to do here?" Emily looked up at her. "I really want to find him. But it could be that he's already. Think happy thoughts." Evelyn interrupted her. "You're half German, aren't you?" She laughed at her friend's amusement, and Emily smiled herself. They spent the next hour finishing cleaning up and discussing grand plans for a family reunion. A couple of days later, Emily was sitting across from David at a huge table in the lawyer's office, signing the divorce papers. Just like that, within 3 days, thanks to connections, she had become a free woman. The divorce left her with personal belongings, some jewelry, and still a sense of dignity, which she proudly carried receipts to work, along with a bottle of champagne and a box of ether. So that was it, Emily sighed. When her friend met her at the front desk of the publishing house, 9 years of marriage were a thing of the past. Evelyn hugged her tightly. "Well, that's good. I never liked him." That was the plain truth. The mutual antipathy of husband and girlfriend had always left Emily utterly bewildered. 40 minutes till the end of the day. Wait a minute. Evelyn led her into her office with 1 million manuscripts lying all over the place. "I don't have anywhere to be in a hurry." Feigning nonchalance, Emily said, clearing a place for herself on the small sofa. She liked the atmosphere of the study. There lived her creativity, 1,000 pieces of paper, in fine print, storing many stories, thoughts, and experiences. Lots of new names, addresses, booklets, from notes that were pasted here and there on the computer monitor, the system unit of the closet wall. Amadeus Publishing was considered one of the best in the region, and Evelyn, with her artistic taste for innate literacy, found her calling as editor. Emily herself, who graduated with a degree in landscape design, she dreamed of creating landscape masterpieces somewhere in the warm state, where there are no cold and snowstorms. Instead, she became a lonely, unemployed housewife, and a divorcee to boot. These thoughts put her in a bad mood. She picked up the scrolls, picked up the first manuscript she could find, and before she knew it, she was reading. "Ow, Earth to Emily." She heard her friend's voice above her ear. She was standing there already dressed in her cloak. She jokingly called her favorite poncho and held her coat in her hands. The friend stepped out of the noisy publishing house and plunged into the thick October twilight. The first stars had already lit up in the sky. It was dark and clear, with no hint of rain. It smelled of white leaves and wet asphalt. The city lived its usual life, and it did not care about other people's problems. He was leisurely preparing for winter, shedding his last garments in Central Park and seeing flocks of migrating birds off into the distance. The lock clicked. Emily opened the door to her mother's apartment. The place smelled different now. There were boxes of clothes everywhere, exuding the smell of her favorite linens, perfume, shoes, and cosmetics. The latter, however, was very little, for the girl preferred natural beauty. In the kitchen, the refrigerator was sticking out, half filled with food, and in a vase. On the table in a picturesque still life were grapes. The girls ordered pizza, and when the payoff came, they gave champagne to your new life. Evelyn gave a short but pithy toast to the search for her father. Emily added thoughtfully. They clinked their glasses and bought the liquid out of themselves. By the way, what are you planning to do? Looking for a job. Evelyn put some grapes in her mouth. My father first. Just don't know where to start. I don't even have a visa. And I've overstayed my passport. Probably also need to figure out what kind of capital I have now. I think I should go to a pawn shop. Evelyn squinted at the pawn shop. Do you want to sell the trinkets your ex-husband gave you? Yeah, I don't have any other options right now. I've got a couple thousand cash in my wallet and an equal amount on my card. What am I gonna do with it? Spending a lot of utilities, groceries, travel. Again, not to mention the money for a new passport, visas, buying tickets. Emily bought a sip of champagne. But of course I can't help much with the money. But I will give you a price tip. Emily looked questioningly at her friend. She looked straight into her eyes. Rob called, which made Emily gasp for champagne in surprise. Are you out of your mind? What's the big deal? It's been so many years. Exactly. So many years you think he's still mad? Evelyn asked. Emily shrugged her shoulders. I'd be mad. I basically just left Rob. Emily and Rob had experienced what they call first love. It had been a delightful year. Their last class, the notes in their notebooks, the looks, the secret smiles, the long walks in the evenings. Their first kiss in the fall rain, when he walked her home after the fall ball. Exactly 13 years ago. And then there was graduation, the first adult sunrise of their very first time. All those images, like the frames of a movie, suddenly flashed before my eyes, a lump in my throat. They parted so incongruously. Emily went to Ulyanovsk State Institute in the Department of Design, and Rob went to the Moscow Academy of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Distance night calls, rare meetings on no, eternal, and sometimes not read text messages. Next, the girls realized that it's all over. A year later, Rob's parents died in a car accident. His little sister was taken to the country by her grandmother, and his visits to his hometown ceased altogether. A new life began for both of them, and Emily got David, a handsome, intelligent man from a good family. And only Wendy is sad that her son-in-law is David and not Rob. One day they did see each other, and that meeting nearly took Emily out of her mind. It was the day of her wedding. There was a knock at the door. Then she heard her mother gasp in the hallway. Here was the wrap-up. In her wedding dress, she walked out of the room and was stunned. In front of her stood her first love with a huge bouquet of roses. They looked at each other. I have lived through these years of separation, regretting the lost time. Rob didn't say a word. He just handed her the flowers and left. Emily, powerless, she sank down on the floor in the hallway and closed her eyes. She had never felt such pain before. She wanted to throw off the dress and run after him, but she didn't. Emily, what is it? Evelyn's anxious voice rushed her out of her thoughts. Do you think he still remembers me? She looked hopefully at her friend, who put her hands on her shoulders and smiled. I'm sure he does. If you must know, he's not even married yet. Oh, Emily brushed it off. How do you know? I know. He and I call each other sometimes. That you didn't say anything either. Emily glared at her. Evelyn nonchalantly poured champagne. Well, what were you happy with your husband? You were going to have a house and children. Why would you want to be hurt? Of course she was right. But Emily felt something akin to a pang of jealousy. They'd kept in touch all these years. He'd asked the girl about me, overwhelmed by an emotion she couldn't hide, no matter how hard she tried. Evelyn shook her head negatively. You are a taboo subject, so he doesn't want to talk to me, much less help me. Her friend stroked her arm cheerfully. And somehow, I don't feel that way. Call him. She pulled out her phone, and the next second, a message with Rob's contact popped up on the display. Thank you. Emily leaned forward and hugged Evelyn in an impulse. By the time they said goodbye, it was nearly midnight. Good thing tomorrow was Saturday. Otherwise, the Branches would have had to peck their noses all day at work, already lying in bed. Emily twisted her phone thoughtfully in her hands. She was scared to death to dial, but the desire to hear his voice again was unbearable. His handsome face appeared before her. The last time they had met, his gray eyes had been filled with pain and with regret. His lips kissed her neck so frantically. Hers had once turned into a thin line of resentment and disappointment. Oh, how well she remembered that expression, a deep look that had left a huge scar in her heart. Finally exhausted, she fell into a deep, restless sleep. She dreamed about her mother, Rob's school, and the whole kaleidoscope of events and memories. She woke up the next morning with a terrible headache, blaming it on the champagne she had drunk the night before. The girl quickly ran to the shower and poured herself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table in the kitchen, putting the phone in front of her. For 10 minutes she hypnotized him with her gaze, then gathered her wits and quickly dialed the number. I wish he hadn't picked up the phone, she thought to herself. Hello, a hoarse voice that sent shivers down her body. Emily answered her with a loss of her hand, and she nearly dropped the phone. What to say? Hello, Rob, hanged a long pause, and Emily thought that now she would hear a short ringing. Apparently, he recognized her. Emily, it's you, me. She didn't know what else to say. I didn't expect to hear you. Rob's voice was calm. How's it going? Good, and how are yours? The girl struggled to regain her breath. Her heart was pounding like crazy. I've been better. Rob snorted and asked without hesitation. What do you mean? Emily didn't understand. In the sense that we hadn't spoken in 13 years. And then suddenly you call me. What do you mean by that? Stupidly, she repeated, and mentally I immediately scolded myself for it. Actually, a lot had happened. She wanted to tell him everything so badly that before her brain had time to react, she blurted out, "We can meet." She was immediately frightened of her own words. There was a short pause. Then came the answer. When and where? The coffee house, tomorrow 10:00 a.m. That would be fine. See you tomorrow. And Rob hung up. Emily stared at the phone as if it had grown ears. She did make an appointment. Yes, he said yes, didn't he? The tea went cold. Emily poured it down the sink and mechanically washed the cup and put it in the fridge. Did Evelyn bend the stars in delight when her friend told her about this morning's conversation with Rob? That evening they sat in the kitchen again, drinking instant coffee with steeped milk. An abomination, in Evelyn's opinion, but the day before Emily had bought a cappuccino and beat the wonderful milk foam with it. She sprinkled a little cinnamon on top and turned the ordinary black liquid into a delicious drink. Just like that. She smiled, embarrassed. Tomorrow's the meeting. Well done. Evelyn took a sip from the foam as well. A funny mustache was left on her upper lip. What are you going to wear? Emily shrugged. I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. Think about it. You have to look fabulous at least. And at most, she laughed. At most, you have to look like the woman he can't live without. The man sitting at the coffee shop table was so familiar to Emily that she could hardly suppress the lump forming in her throat. A slender figure, handsome, manly face, gray eyes, and dimples on his cheeks. When he smiled, he rolled onto the table and rubbed the menu pamphlet in his hands. Oh, Those hands they had embraced and caressed her once. Emily realized what she wanted. Had it been all these years? No, sorely. She wondered to herself. Dressed in retracted shields, jeans, a shirt, God, and the mossy Cossacks. She had felt confident a moment ago, but now all the confidence had evaporated somewhere. She plucked up courage, however, and headed for the table. Seeing her, Rob froze for a moment. Then he stood up to meet her. He hesitated awkwardly. "Hello," Emily smiled. "Thank you for coming." He, too, was wearing jeans and a shirt, only unlike her. His shirt was austere, and so was his silvery look. They sat down across from each other. Silence hung over them. Emily knew he was waiting for her action, but she couldn't make up her mind. Rob looked at her as if she were the only one on earth. Well, she worked up the courage. "Are you waiting for an explanation?" He only shrugged his shoulders. "By the way, this is for you." He held it out to her. "Where did you get it?" "Sincerely surprised, girl. It's October." "Emily, you're funny, honestly." He even laughed, and in his voice she heard a long-forgotten, but familiar casual intonation. "In addition to October, it's also the 21st century." "Exactly," she muttered and smiled. "So what did you want to tell me?" Rob leaned back on the couch. "Why don't we order something first?" "Go ahead." Emily relaxed a little. She'd forgotten what it was like to be around him talking, to see him smile and squint his eyes. The waitress took her order for 2 lats and a couple of deep ones, and they were alone again. Rob looked into her face. "Well, tell me. I'm getting worried myself." Emily looked up and flinched as his hand rested on top of hers. She felt the heat wash over her whole body. It was either embarrassment from fear or a sudden buildup of excitement. "I was divorced the day before yesterday." She wanted to say something else, but she blurted it out. "But you probably already know." "I just knowed," he said. His hand still rested on her arm. "So there's no point in telling about the past, because you know about it. I'm thinking of the main thing, then. Do you remember what I told you about my father?" He nodded. "Well, none of that is true. He wasn't an engineer at all. As my mother said, he was a foreigner, or rather a German, whom my mother had met when she was young. They fell in love. She got pregnant with him for reasons unknown to me. He knows nothing about me and I about him. I found out about it myself a couple of days ago when I found my mother's letters that she wrote to him, but didn't send." Rob looked at her intently, listening, nodding, and Emily continued, "I only have the address and the name Alex Schwarzenberg." "That's not insignificant," Rob summarized. "Have you looked on social media?" "Nothing like that, or rather suitable. So you want me to run this information through service channels?" She nodded. Rob suddenly became sad. "So I was hoping for nothing, that you just wanted to see me." She flashed back. "Of course I wanted to, but I was embarrassed. I was scared to death that you were holding a grudge that you wouldn't forgive." He looked at her, and his eyes suddenly sparkled. "I forgave him long ago. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't have held a grudge. After all, our breakup was my own fault. But I was in such a mess. Everything was piled on top of school, losing my parents. Jenna was practically left in my arms. I mean, my grandmother was already sick. I hadn't considered the fact that you needed attention too. I thought you would wait as long as I needed. I had no right to think so." A traitorous tear slid down Emily's cheek, as if a huge boulder had fallen from his soul after his confession. "I waited. It's just that when you were completely gone, I thought you didn't need me anymore. So I decided to move on with my life. And when you came to my wedding day, I wanted to run after you, but I didn't because of David, because of my mother." He looked at her with all his eyes, just as he had 13 years ago. And that look was mesmerizing. They'd brought their order, to distract them somehow. Emily drank a sip of the fragrant liquid. "Emily." Rob looked out the window at the gray sky with a smile. "You haven't changed at all. I haven't lost sight of you. Evelyn and I have called a lot over the years, and she's blabbed to me about everything about you. even though I didn't ask. And for that, I am immensely grateful to her. We'll find your father for sure. It's just going to take time. I don't work for the authorities now. Why did the girl raise her eyebrows in surprise? You have dreamed about it almost since first grade, haven't you? I worked there, but not for long. My grandmother died. Jenna got cancer, and I had to quit my job to devote all my time to her. I had no one else besides my sister. Emily was stunned. She remembered very well. Rob's little sis. A ruddy little girl with blonde pigtails and silver like her brother's eyes. Jenna has cancer. The girl repeated the word. It was as if she couldn't believe it. Rob nodded. A bone marrow transplant is required, but it costs a fabulous amount of money. I took out a loan for the maintenance therapy. But a job as a security guard in Europe still doesn't cover all the costs. But you don't have to worry about that, he warned Emily. Oh my God, Rob, I want to do something to help. He shook his head. I'm afraid there's nothing you can do. And I can see her. I can come and visit you. You want to come and visit? Reluctantly, Rob asked. Really, of course. Emily perked up. If you don't mind. He grinned and touched the edge of the glass with his finger. Frozen Jr. Actually, I don't mind. But Jenna won't be happy about it. Why not? Emily was surprised. But she thought it was clear. I'll find something to say. But then we can go right now. If you're not busy, of course. It's just that it's my day off, and I promised my sister a walk in the park. I'm free. Then let's go. He put the bill on the table and gave Emily a hand, taking her dressing room number. Rob walked confidently to the exit, and the girl, grabbing flowers and a bag, hurried after him, and one of them never touched me. When they got into the novelist's car, Emily asked him to stop by her house. There she pulled her favorite Italian handkerchief out of the closet and, putting it in a bag, left the apartment. Where are we going? Puzzled, the girl asked as they drove past the street where they used to live. Out of town, Rob answered, turning on his turn signal. When Jenna got sick, we sold my parents' apartment and bought a small house in the suburbs to be closer to nature. There's fresh air, a river, beauty there. He caught a glimpse of his companion. Have you changed your mind about going? No, of course not. Just asked Emily, something confused, and stared out the window. They drove almost all the way to the village in silence. Finally, Rob's Lassetti stopped outside a small house, boarded up in white and surrounded by a white wooden fence at night. Obviously, all its charms blue left here in the yellow grass of the forest, but studded with fallen leaves in the fire on the red rowan trees near the porch. Emily smelled as soon as he got out of the car near the fence to the track of the chassis on the master's bench, spread out in the trees. Carefully, with the hand of the departed September, Rob was working the wicket door, letting the guests in front and right onto the path in front of them. With a happy bark, a huge shaggy dog came out. Emily cried out in surprise, and the animal began to cash her hands frantically, wanting a package. Look at him, Rob grinned. He patted it on the withers. And you turned him to the girl. You wouldn't know. Emily squatted down beside the dog, his tail lolling. Sherlock, does he really have to be 14 now? Yes, she remembered the time they'd walked together, then just a silly puppy on the boardwalk in the park. He had changed a lot since then. One thing remained the same, however, his easygoing nature and cheerful disposition. Emily hugged that head and smiled at her, suddenly so nostalgic that it gave her a sweet tickle under her spoon. She and Rob stroked Sherlock and looked at each other. A woman's voice came from somewhere. The young men raised their heads to the porch at once, dressed in warm suits, scooter jerseys, a hat. Standing there was a very thin, pale girl with bruises under her eyes and a poker face indicating that she was very sick. Hello, Jenna. Emily. She got to her feet and smiled. Jenna stared at her for a good 10 seconds. Then she turned around and went inside. Don't mind her, Rob reassured her. I'll be right here for a minute. He walked quickly toward the house and disappeared behind the door. Emily felt unspeakably lonely. Sherlock poked her in the palms of her hands with his wet nose at first, then simply lay down at her feet. Obviously, he'd spent all his energy on meeting an old acquaintance, and now he was just stretched out, snorting, breathing heavily. Right across the path, it got cold. A wind came out of nowhere, and Emily wished she had worn a hat, and her leather jacket didn't have a hood. But then the door crept open and Rob came out. Seeing her folded up from the cold, he practically paddled her and dragged her into the house. "Are you cold at all?" I'm sorry, please. I just had to tell her there was a tit." He spread his palms, her forearms, and looked at her with such longing that Emily felt hot. Surprised at her own boldness, she suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck and stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips together. He immediately responded to the kiss, gently and tentatively at first, then assertively, passionately. Surely they would have stood there in the halls making up for lost time. But the door to the house was open, and a mocking voice said, "Come in already." Oh my goodness. A knock was heard and all was quiet. Obviously, Jenna realized what she had interrupted and hurriedly retreated. Emily struggled away from the group, hiding her face against his neck. She suddenly felt like laughing and jumping. He was standing there, his arms around her waist, breathing heavily. "What on earth are you doing?" He whispered into her hair. "Do you want me dead?" She only shook her head no. "Come on, let's go." Rob grinned, then Jenna. "That's enough. Punch." They walked into the small hallway. It smelled of fresh firewood and something delicious that reminded them of their childhood, of their grandmother. "We need to fire it up." The stove, Light said businesslike, coming out to meet them. "It's cold at home." Her cheeks were still flushed with embarrassment, and Emily blushed too. Now Rob took his guest's jacket and went to deal with the heating. "Hi." Sveta stared at Emily point-blankly. "Come on in." The girl nodded and went into the room where the owner of the house stacked firewood. "Still beautiful, already," peacefully murmured Light, following her. "Thank you. You're still just as pretty," Emily parried with a smile as she sat down on the fiddler and the couch. They both laughed, and the ice was broken. Pretty soon the room was filled with the sounds of happiness, their logs. Emily looked around the room where they were sitting. There were 2 more doors. Obviously, the bedroom furnishings were more than modest. Overnight, the thought of a measured, unpretentious life and a kind of peacefulness. With that of the modern things, the guest noticed a TV, a vacuum cleaner in the corner, and a cell phone standing on the charger. The whole atmosphere took her somewhere far away, and Rob misinterpreted her gaze. He explained, "Having sold the apartment, we bought this house because it was not expensive, and with the remaining money made the operation. Plus we had enough for a few more courses of chemo. That wasn't even in the kitchen yet." The Light snickered, raised a tablecloth on the table. "Let's eat already. My appetite's awakened today. You're not allowed to stand at the stove." The older brother frowned. "Was setting something up in there." "I didn't scare you. I just put the chicken and potatoes in the oven. So don't be fooled by the foie gras tonight." She turned and disappeared into the doorway. Emily got up from the couch. "I'll go help her. I'm glad she hasn't lost her sense of humor." She looked at Rob with a smile, and meeting his appreciative gaze, went to get Jenna. They dined quietly, family style, talking softly and teasing each other, remembering that she hadn't come empty-handed. Emily handed an Italian silk handkerchief from a branch. She thanked her warmly, and tearing a knitted cap from her head, went to the mirror to try it on. They watched in silence as the skinny fingers of the pro-crow tied an intricate knot on the top of her head, and behind the chair they returned to a very different one. Jenna feminine. Content. Even a blush appeared. Emily didn't notice how time flew by, and a sniffle began outside the window. The rain was intensifying. Rob stared at her tensely, as if he wanted to say something. It was getting late, and Emily met his gaze. "I need to go home. I'll take you," he said disappointedly. "Just the car to warm up." "Stay with us." Jenna grabbed her arm. You don't have to go anywhere tomorrow." Rob froze halfway through. Emily was at a loss. On the one hand, she really wanted to stay. On the other hand, she was afraid to force the issue. They had only just met after all these years. "No, I can't tonight. Maybe some other time." And seeing the disappointed light on Jenna's face, she added, "Why don't you come to my place? I do have an even smaller dwelling, but between us girls there will be a bed for you." Realizing that persuasion was useless, Rob went out into the shadows, and Jenna grabbed Emily's hand. "Emily, don't leak him anymore. You hear?" The girl stopped and stared at her with her eyes wide open. "He still loves you. If you don't plan on being with him, leave now and don't come back. He won't survive a second time." Emily realized, suddenly, that the moment of truth had arrived, when she had no right to lie, no right to be cowardly, no right to teach, no right to wiggle. The question was clear and implied a straightforward and honest answer. "I will never hurt him. I love him too. Just don't tell them that." For now, Jenna nodded. Her face relaxed, and she finally let Emily out on her arm. Rob was waiting for her in the car. When she emerged from the gate, he climbed out of the cabin and gallantly opened the door of his Lacetti to her. "Thank you," he muttered. Not being able to look him in the eye slammed the door. He returned to his seat. "Thank you for what?" The girl didn't understand for the branch. "I haven't seen her so happy and alive in a long time. It's just great. I'm very glad I was able to help in some way," Emily said sincerely. The rain licked the windshield, muttering the radio. They were driving on the slippery highway, and the atmosphere in the cabin seemed hot to the extreme. Suddenly, Rob slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road, turning off the ignition and putting the car on the handbrake. He moved closer to Emily and pulled her by the neck, beating his lips against hers. She surrendered to his power. Over her hands penetrated under his jacket and stopped where her heart was pounding frantically, her own heart thudding in her ribs. It felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. Finally, Rob pulled away from her, as if the years had never happened. "Barely breathing," he muttered. "I wish they weren't there," he muttered. She was at a loss for words in response. She just stared into his face and dissolved into it. It wasn't for nothing that they say first love is the strongest, most unforgettable. And in her case, apparently, also the only one. All the years of her life with David suddenly seemed to her like a farce, a production in which she was playing a role. The real her was here in this car with this man. They were looking at each other, moving closer again, about to touch her lips again. A phone call interrupted them from the sweet event. After 5 seconds of comprehending what was happening, Emily finally realized that the phone was beeping in her bag. When she picked up the phone, she heard the angry voice of Evelyn. "Mother, my woman. Who do you think you are? I haven't been able to reach you all day." "Evelyn, calm down. I'm fine." "Good for you," my friend said caustically. "I almost had a heart attack. You're not home. You do not pick up the phone. What should I do? Where are you?" "I'm with Rob." There was a short pause. "Well," Evelyn's voice softened noticeably. "Then you're simplified. Say hello and call me when you have time, but don't take too long." And she disconnected. Emily stared at Rob with a smile. Shrugging, "I heard everything." He laughed and almost went deaf. What was she getting so worked up about? "Worried about me," Emily answered. "Let's go. Come on, let's go." Rob started the engine, and they drove leisurely down the wet highway. Near the door of her apartment, they kissed again. He declined the invitation to come in, for he didn't want to leave his sister alone for too long right in the driveway. Writing down Alex Schwarzenberg's details and his address, he said goodbye to Emily and left. Once home, Emily ran to the shower, jumped into bed, and dialed Evelyn's number and told her about the events of the day. She listened attentively, occasionally inserting phrases like, "Wow," and "I'm shocked." They chatted for about an hour until Rob texted me, "Thank you for the day." Emily smiled to herself and, closing her eyes, instantly fell asleep. It was quiet in the pawn shop, except for the cognacs of a huge antique clock standing as decoration near the counter under glass. The display case was full of things and rings to cameras and video recorders brought in by people in need of money. Emily felt extremely uncomfortable and insecure in her bag was everything she got from David. After the divorce, she and Evelyn were supposed to meet back at her house since she was afraid to walk down the street alone with such valuable things. But her friend was held up at work. She was too embarrassed to call Rob. Behind the counter, she was met by a dry-looking man wearing thick-lensed glasses. She looked like a leprechaun and laid out in front of him everything she had brought, namely, a pair of gold earrings with diamonds, a platinum ring with a scattering of tiny emeralds, a gold watch, and finally, an engagement ring. It wasn't worth much, of course, but Emily didn't want to leave it behind. Suddenly, the front door slammed, and she was relieved to see a panting Evelyn High. She literally rolled into the pawn shop. In a hurry, folding umbrellas like a blotting dog. "What a weather." "Hi," waved Emily to her. "You're just in time." The little man behind the counter cowered at the door. Apparently, he thought someone else might come in. Evelyn guessed his thoughts and leaned on the counter in a familiar manner. In a mock low voice, she said, "No, that's all. That's all we're waiting for." "Well, that's fine. Leprechaun, here we go." Half an hour later, the girls emerged into the pouring rain, satisfied and pleasantly surprised. The money they got for the jewels should be enough to cover their first time out of work, to find their father, and to go to Germany. "So much for my unsuccessful family life," Emily joked, clutching her purse with the money. The cab Evelyn had ordered stopped near them, and the friends hurried to it. As they drove to Emily's apartment, Rob called. She heard his low voice in the receiver. "Hi." The girl didn't notice how her face blurred into a smile. "Baby," she rolled her eyes and turned away to the window. "Emily, there's news about your father so quickly." She was surprised. Yes, there was silence on the phone, and Emily's insides went cold. "He's dead." "No. What are you saying?" "He's alive." Emily's tears suddenly flowed. Her hands were shaking, so she was afraid to drop the phone. "Can you come and tell me everything?" "Yeah, just a couple of hours to get the medicine off the branch." "Okay, thank you." Evelyn, anxious, looked at her friend. "So, what's going to happen there?" "He's alive." Emily laughed through her sobs. "My father is alive." Her friend looked at her and tears suddenly flowed from her eyes too. Continuing to cry, the girls embraced. The cab driver looked in the rearview mirror at a loss, pondering whether to tell them they were both drinking or not to get involved in this confusing matter. The girls were sitting in the kitchen with a bottle of valerian on the table in front of them. The time dragged on endlessly, so when the beep of the long bell sounded, they both snapped out of their seats. "Evelyn, hello," smiled Rob, when they opened the door for him. "What's up?" He froze, looking at the excited faces of the girls. "Come in," Evelyn commanded quickly. "Don't, Tommy. We're dying of impatience." The young man squeezed into the cramped hallway, which seemed to have shrunk in size, and began to take off his shoes. Once he had already accepted, Evelyn pushed him into the kitchen and sat him down at the table. Seeing the valerian, Rob grinned. "I think I missed it." Both girls looked at him with such a look that he hurriedly opened the folder he had in his hand and pulled out several pieces of paper and the fine print, handing them to Emily. He said, "Here you go, princess. You are in for a big surprise." Emily carefully took the documents and sat down in a chair. Her strength suddenly left her. Her head felt dizzy. "Don't worry, that's what you whispered to Evelyn. Read it to me." She began to read. Extract from the Register of Noble Families of Germany. Alex Manfred von Schwarzenberg, 12th generation. Date of birth, June 12, 1961. Place of birth, Germany. Rhineland-Palatinate. City of Trier. Parents, Hans Friedrich von Schwarzenberg and Birgit Elisabeth von Schwarzenberg, née Kaiser. Higher education in the humanities. Specialties in history, international relations. What followed were many dates of events and documents that told a brief history of Duke von Schwarzenberg's life. Emily stopped reading. She was confused and bewildered. Her father was a duke, and in the 12th generation too. Unbelievable. Oh, Mother, how could you keep all this from me? She thought bitterly. My mother is a woman. Evelyn broke the silence in the kitchen. Before you now, we must call your ladyship. No more, no less. She laughed. Vid, stop it. I can't believe it. It's all true. She turned to the other side. He nodded affirmatively. There isn't a picture, she asked hopefully. Alas, no. That's all I could find. Oh my God, said Emily. I thank you so much. You're welcome. He answered and somehow became sad. He watched her absorbed with the news of her origins. Suddenly, he thought there was no place for him in her life again. But pronounced Rob, slapping himself generationally and rising from his stools. If you don't need me anymore, I'll go. Emily frightenedly grabbed his arm. Evelyn tactfully walked out of the kitchen. Wait, don't go, please, Emily. He looked directly into her eyes. I'm not stupid. I know you're going away to look for your father now. And that is the right thing to do. But you won't come back here, leave me again. I don't want to die of longing for you again. Let me go now, please. She looked at him without taking her eyes off him. I can't lose you again like last time. And if you leave now, I'll follow you, and I don't care how it looks. You need to think. You have another interesting destiny ahead of you. There is nothing in my life except the work of hospital wards of debts for treatment off the branch. He held her hands and silver in his eyes, the sadness of the world. But I want to be in your life too. Yes, I will find my father, but he may not want to see me either. Who knows? And even if he does, it won't change anything. I can't let you go. At that moment they heard the front door slam. It was Evelyn who went home, leaving the two of them alone. Rob stood across from Emily, hesitant to believe what she had just said. She was looking at him so openly and sincerely. Her lips flushed her cheeks. Reflections don't tempt me. Emily, don't tempt me. Rom, I've been begging you for minutes now in a feigned angry way, she said. After all, I must keep my dignity. He smiled and brought his face close to hers. She immediately guided her hands and his neck lightly. He pressed his forehead against hers. You understand that I still can't breathe evenly when you're around. I could say the same, she whispered back. The hell with you, developing it again. What didn't the girl understand? Yes, my heart, he laughed nervously. I can't give up the joy now, to hold you in my arms, to kiss you until you make me, like our first time at the prom. Remember, she nodded. Pulling away for a moment, he picked her up on his arm, carried her into the room, and laid her gently on the couch. Time stood still, as if there had been no 13 years of separation, no resentments, no misunderstandings. There were only two men and women in love, longing for each other, so that the world around them ceased to exist. This evening belonged only to them. And then what would happen? It took a month and a half to apply for a new passport and a Schengen visa. During this time, Emily and Rob became close and practically never parted. Emily often went to the farm. She went for walks with Jenna, and the weather was fine. At the end of November, the days were clear and frosty. Finally, a one-way ticket to Philadelphia, Frankfurt, was bought, and Emily got busy packing her bags. As her departure drew nearer, Rob became withdrawn and moody, and did not answer his phone for long periods of time, disappearing into thin air. Then one day he showed up at Emily's house drunk. She had never seen him like that. Without saying a word and putting him to bed on the sofa, she sat there for a long time, gazing into his familiar face. In the back of her mind, she understood the reason for his behavior, but there was nothing she could do to change this trip. She waited with excitement and impatience, and he must have understood those feelings. After all, this was her father we were talking about. Rob woke up the next morning and apologized at length, and left without even kissing her goodbye. The flight was scheduled for December 23, and Rob volunteered to drive her to Philadelphia in his car. Emily didn't mind, for she wanted to spend more time with him, to talk to him, to reassure him that she would return once she'd met her father and gotten to know him better. The tension between them in the last few days had become unbearable. Rob was sullenly silent, and on the eve of departure, he simply grabbed her out of the group in the elevator and squeezed her with such force that she almost cracked her ribs. That night they made love frantically and passionately, as the last time, and in the morning he was aloof and alien again. Emily was very upset about that. She was also worried about how the envelope with the money she had left from the branch the day before would react. It wasn't much, but it would have been enough to cover a month's worth of medicine. When they said goodbye to her, Emily had made the girl swear not to say anything to Rob before she left. "Jenna, you know I'll be back." She looked seriously into the face of her man's sister. "I won't leave you." That nodded and sobbed. Tightly she hugged Emily goodbye. The drive to Philadelphia took them 2 hours. In all that time, they barely exchanged a dozen phrases with each other. Rob stared intensely at the road, clutching Emily's palm in his hand. Words were unnecessary. Both understood that. They arrived in Philadelphia at 3:00 a.m. The flight was scheduled to leave at 6. The airport was crowded, as usual. Emily and Rob trudged through the crowd to the check-in counter with their suitcases, and they had only a few minutes to say goodbye. Rob looked longingly at Emily. "Emily, you're slipping away again," he said sadly. "I'll be back, I promise." She gusted, wrapped her arms around him, stood on tiptoe, and pressed her lips to his. Their breaths mingled. The flight was announced, and Emily, struggling to pull away from him, wiped away her tears, headed out to meet her past. On the plane, she calmed down a bit and tuned into the flight. The flight to Frankfurt was 8 hours long, and she had time to think about her actions. The thought that she might not be welcome in her father's house made her shiver again. He did not know, after all, that his sweetheart had been pregnant, much less that he now had a grown daughter. Perhaps he was happily married and had other children, and it may well be that she has brothers and sisters. The turbines rumbled. The plane rushed forward. She lifted off and hurtled off into the distance, hurtling toward the unknown. She thought. The airport of Frankfurt, the largest in Europe, was like an anthill. Countless terminals, floors, and check-in desks. Everything around was set up for Christmas. There were even photo areas with Santa Claus in each waiting room. Emily thought of Rob, who is on his way back home right now. Pulling out her phone, she tried to catch Wi-Fi to drop a message to him on the circuit. Plugging it in, she typed in a short text. "I've made the flight. Missing you already." Immediately a reply from Rob came in, and so did I. The answer seemed dry and one-worded to her. Immediately the mood soured. However, the girl nevertheless pulled herself together and went to get her luggage, while remembering to skim the message on the turn. From the airport, she took a cab to the train station, where she caught a train. She had several destination connections ahead of her, and she struggled hard to sleep. After all, she had spent the previous night on the road. In addition, she was exhausted by the flight-related travel. Excitement. Sitting down by the window, she watched the very unfamiliar scenery flashed by outside the window. Rocky hills of cavernous tunnels, and covered with thick growths of forest, windmills valleys with a scattering of tiny river girls with swimming ducks and swans, industrial area with huge warehouses and hangars, ruins of ancient castles on top of mountains, old Catholic churches with sad roofs. Emily always loved the unique comfort of old Europe with its cuddly bears, lush greenery, and good-natured natives. There was order everywhere. It seemed as if the inhabitants had made special preparations for the arrival of some important guest. The carriage Emily rode in was crowded. Mostly it was young people in jeans, liberal jackets, and Christmas hats, but also people from the East, from Asia, and God knows what other sides of the world. After 2 transfers, the girl finally boarded the train to Trier. It was a pity she hadn't taken care of the hotel, for she was literally knocked off her feet. She should have showered and fallen on any surface that resembled a bed. Besides, she was unbearably hot in her coat and warm boots, which seemed too light. Snow-covered Philadelphia. Finally, after a long flight and 3 train transfers, Emily stood in the center of the hall of Trier Station with 2 suitcases and a confused face. People were scurrying around, shrugging her shoulders, hurriedly apologizing, smiling, waving Christmas greetings. It was quite clear to her that she needed somewhere to sleep and gather her thoughts today. Before going to the cherished address, on top of that, she was starving because the last time she'd eaten was on a plane. A decent number of hours had passed since then. She stepped out of the station building into the city twilight, breathed in the cool winter air, and thought about the fact that somewhere in that city, 1,000 kilometers away from her home, lived her only family man. She had her mother's letters in her bag and a sapphire ring in case he didn't believe her. Thinking she needed somewhere to stay, she asked a pretty woman at the bus stop where the nearest hotel was. 20 minutes later, she was at the front desk of a small hotel on Baldwinstrasse, not far from the train station. After taking the keys and the porter, she asked if she could order his room for dinner. And upon receiving an affirmative answer, she headed for the elevator. On the 3rd floor, a tired, hungry Emily looked for her room and literally fell into it, dragging her suitcases behind her, dropping her coat and shoes. She collapsed onto a large steel bed behind a lilac bedspread. For a good 5 minutes, she took a breath and calmed her train of thought, a worry in her head. The room was quite modest, but clean, tidy, decked out in lilac tones, furnished with modern, ivory-colored furniture. It reminded Emily of Provence, where she had been with her ex-husband. The girl quickly took a shower, in which she was happy to find soft slippers, fluffy terry cloth robe and clothes. In them, she ran to open the door. They'd brought dinner quickly with French fries, fried mushrooms with chicken, and she picked up a cup of tea and walked out onto the balcony, hidden behind the curtains, straight into her robe. In front of her stretched a bare alley, dedicated to leaning over it flamboyantly, not with the heads of lanterns. Trier. It wasn't a big city, but the streets were very crowded. Christmas lights sparkled and streamed everywhere. Bells were ringing. Music was playing. Emily thought also that it was a fairy tale time. It was the right atmosphere to symbolize the beginning of something new and good in her life. She went back to her room and got into bed. Retrieving her mother's letters from her bag, she reread them again and pressed them to her face. It seemed to her that they still held the warmth and scent of someone who would never write anything to anyone again. Her eyes began to slip, and with an unbelievable effort, she pressed the light button. Emily drifted off to sleep. When she opened her eyes again, the sun was already high. It gathered through on the curtains and left a light streak on the parquet floor. Emily hung her feet off the bed and barefoot, walked like a window. Pushing that back against the wall, she let more light into the room and closed the balcony door. A frosty draught immediately burst into the room, chasing away the remnants of sleep on her face and replacing them with a blush. Her feet immediately froze, and the girl hurriedly put on her slippers. Today is Catholic Christmas Eve, thought Emily. How symbolic. She took a shower, then dressed long and carefully, choosing an outfit, folding her hairdryer, knotty curls, and doing her makeup. Then, putting back in her bag of letters, she forgot herself and walked out of the room into the hallway. Not far from the elevator hung a large mirror, and the girl looked at her reflection with approval. She was wearing beige slacks, bananas, a purse, a new sweater to match, patent, brown with large buckles, and an Italian shawl with ornaments and tassels. And only her hair brought some resonance to this elegant bow. The dark curls didn't want to lie down in any way, neatly thinking it was even more natural that way. Emily went downstairs near the front desk, and she spotted a rack of travel guides and bought one. There was a tourist map enclosed in it, and when she opened it, the girl realized that she couldn't find a better one. It showed all the streets, alleys and buildings in the city with detailed names and numbers. When she arrived at the hotel restaurant, she ordered herself a cup of cappuccino. She didn't feel like eating, for everything inside trembled with excitement. She thought of Rob. He must be at work by now, or rushing off with his entourage for another treatment. She decided not to write him yet, so she studied the map. It turned out it was only a half-hour walk to the right house. The waiter brought coffee, but Emily couldn't take a sip. So much was her excitement. She got up from the table and stepped outside in relief. She was greeted by a beautiful, cool European morning. In all its festive splendor, she looked at the map. Apparently, she needed to first pass a mysterious place called Porto. Not to go a couple of blocks to cross the footbridge over the Moselle River. According to the map, it was a short walk to Luxembourg, which is no surprise here in Europe. All little Emily smiled at her thoughts. After walking a couple of streets, she found herself in front of an imposing masonry structure that resembled the burnt-out fortress of Porto. Not a game confirmed her hunch. The guidebooks did. Behind her stretched a huge shopping plaza with many stores and restaurants. At other times, Emily would have strolled through it, but not today. After passing a few more streets and a couple of shopping malls, she emerged onto a picturesque embankment, connected to the opposite bank by an ancient wide bridge. There were hills on the other side of the river, studded with villas and mansions, one of which her father lived in. Below the bridge was a large pier where boats and yachts were moored. The river flowed leisurely, as if in a dream. Near the edge of the shoreline, there was a bit of ice. Emily walked along the bridge at the same pace, for her heart was pounding. She felt as if she were about to lose her senses. At last, she was on the opposite bank of the river, and the cozy villas with high fences, behind which the skulls and roofs of the houses were barely visible, stretched out picturesquely before her. Emily had no trouble finding the right address. It was easy enough, for the Schwarzenegger residence was one of the most primitive in this little German Beverly Hills. In front of it was a massive framed stone fence, killed behind the ivy, with an equally bulky cast-iron gate flaunting itself in the middle. Behind them came back, Flying with You and the park, slightly silvered by the morning frost. The climate in these parts was rather mild, and Emily noticed that some of the trees in town were already having buds. The old roofed house was beautiful, built in the late Baroque style. Even at this time of year, surrounded by a garden and ivy-filled flowers, it looked romantic and picturesque. She stood beside the gate and hesitated to ring the bell. This was where her father lived, her ancestors. This was probably where the lifelong love story that had brought her into the world began. A strange feeling gripped Emily. She wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Fear of the unknown turned every nerve into taut strings. She noticed how she paved the gravel, the paths. A man showed up. He looked to be about 50-50. He was quite built with blonde hair. He had a dog with him, a little Yorkshire Terrier, some kind of a hunch. Her sixth sense told her it wasn't just a servant walking a dog. He was wearing light-colored pants, a knit sweater, the color of white wool, and a striped scarf. He reminded the girl of Harry Potter, for on his nose sat glasses with round lenses. Emily felt her pulse clear, at least in half. She realized that it was most likely her father, Alex Schwarzenberg. The girl stood at the gate, unable to move, but he, meanwhile, noticed her and headed straight for the gate. The doggy took over beside him. He walked with confident, vigorous steps, not taking his eyes off his guest. Stopping just a meter away from her, he froze. His face, still young and beautiful, expressed a whole range of feelings of confusion, surprise, disbelief, and even fear. At that moment, Emily finally realized that her father was standing in front of her. It was as if she were looking in a mirror. He had the same facial features, the same straight nose, cheekbones, eye shape, even the shape of his lips. Only Alex Schwarzenberg was blonde, blue-eyed, and Emily inherited her dark hair and chocolate-colored eyes from her mother. "I can help you with something." Unsure, the man asked, keeping his eyes on her face as he prayed that his voice wouldn't tremble. Emily did ask just in case I would like to see Mr. von Schwarzenberg. I have something to tell him. The man opened the gate and came out to meet her. Alex von Schwarzenberg let me introduce myself and held out his hand to her. The girl carefully put her fingers in his palm. I beg your pardon, but who are you? He looked at her expectantly. I come from the USA. Emily said these words and noticed the change in his face. My name is Emily. He instantly went pale. Evidently, he remembered the name well, which had been her mother's and Emily's own name before her marriage. Please come in. He shunned and led her through the gate. They walked in silence all the way home. The dog ran beside her, oblivious to the guest, which is evidently what it is. The most aristocratic upbringing, when even dogs behave decently in the presence of strangers. They were met at the front door of the house by the Major, whom Alex ordered to organize a tea party and summon the Dowager Duchess Birgit. So she has a grandmother as well. At last they were in the hall. The splendor of the surroundings was blinding. Emily felt as if she were in one of the German museums, a country she had seen quite a few in her travels in the past. Antique chandeliers, tapestries, vintage furniture of expensive sorts, wood and silence. Deafening enough that Emily could hear her own heart pounding. Come, let's go into my office, invited Alex. They went into a richly furnished room, more like a library. For cabinets with books stood all around the room. Emily noticed that many of them had no names on the mugs, so they were very old. He gestured to the guest chair by the desk and sat across from her. So, are you related to Wendy? He said quietly, just like that, right in the forehead. Emily knew there was no turning back, so she nodded affirmatively. She's at peace here too. Was there such hope in his voice that she felt a bitter lump in her throat? Alas, she is not here. She died 2 years ago. Emily saw how his face twitched and whether his eyes were moist. And she was also my mother. So she said that. Alex stared at her with his eyes wide open. His hands, neatly folded on the table, nodded visibly. They were both silent. Emily saw tears run down his cheeks. The man was crying for her mother, for their faults, for their lives together, for their past, which quite obviously still remained in his memory, and she was grateful to him for that. He loved her. He waited for her. The girl suddenly realized that she was crying too. So they sat against each other, so similar in blood, but complete strangers. Emily didn't know how much time passed before he asked his question, "How old are you, Emily?" "I turned 30 on August 1. These words Emily whispered, for his voice overflowed with emotion, sat down to the limit. He had no trouble counting in his mind the thoughts, the experiences, the conclusions, the pain. It was all reflected on his face. He covered it with his hands, and the girl heard suppressed sobs. His shoulders implied, as they do for children who cannot calm down. Emily froze. She was suddenly scared. What was going to happen next? A knock on the office door brought him to his senses. He took up his chair and, wiping his cheeks with his palms, said loudly, "Come in." Gerd Schwarzenberg breakfast is already served in the dining room. Frau Birgit has also come down. She is waiting for you. Thank you, Peter. Tell him we'll be there in 10 minutes. Nodding, the servant bowed courteously and disappeared into the doorway. Alex looked at his guest. "So, Emily, are you my daughter?" Emily only lowered her eyes. She had heard the German restraint and was not expecting a warm embrace. However, Alex rose from his seat and walked around the huge solid oak desk and approached Emily. The girl rose towards him, and he, taking her in his hands, drew her to him and enclosed her in his arms, who found herself at his chest, where her heart was beating frantically. Emily suddenly felt at home. It was as if she was a little girl again, who dreamed of saying the word daddy for once, and now she was not alone. The girl was happy. What a pity Rob wasn't here. Then her happiness would have been complete. She hugged him, too, her father, who had not known about her for years. Why did her mother do that? Emily would never know that again. Finally, he pulled her away from his chest and looked her in the face. "Of course, you look like me, girl. It's like looking in a mirror. My God, it's happiness. It's just unbelievable. I looked for Wendy for so many years, but I didn't know where she had moved from Philadelphia, where we first saw each other. I loved her more than life, but she left me. And 30 years later, you show up this miracle." He laughed through his tears, never letting go of his daughter's hand. "I have to give you something." Reluctantly, Emily spoke. After he managed to cope with our emotions, he looked at her questioningly, and she pulled out of her bag letters and a ring. When he saw the ring, Alex covered his mouth with his palm, as if he was afraid he was going to scream. He seemed about to lose his senses. "I gave this ring to my Wendy the last day we met. I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. But then she suddenly disappeared." He touched it with his hand, stroked the faceted stone, and it was as if he were carrying his thoughts back in time. She kept it. Then his gaze fell on the letters, and recognizing the handwriting, he began to read feverishly. After all 3 letters were read, Alex looked at Emily again. Tears were flowing down his face again. "I had lost the love of my life. I had almost come to terms with it, had learned to live without her. But fate had given me a special gift." He smiled now. "She gave me you. A daughter, my flesh and blood, born by the one who stole my heart forever. I found out by accident when I was going through my mother's things. I thought my father was dead. You must have been very lonely when she left." He looked at her with concern and compassion. "Yes, very much. And I was so anxious to find you, just to meet you, to talk to you. I don't need anything." He put his finger to his lips, and she froze half-heartedly. "Now we're going to go, and you're going to meet your grandmother, and then we're going to come back here, and we're going to talk for a long, long time. You will tell me all about your life, about yourself, about your mother." Emily nodded. By the time they were in the dining room, the girl had calmed down a little. Even though everything that was happening seemed to her like a fairy tale, a tricked-out consciousness of a magical dream, she understood that her life had changed forever. Her father believed her immediately and did not send her away unconditionally. She was not questioned in any way. The dining room of Princess von Schwarzenberg's residence was decked out in calm tones, bed-toned, light tapestries, and lightly antique furniture in the late Rococo style. Particularly impressed Emily the lover, vintage and antique, gorgeous sideboard in white oak, golden case, and with other glassware in the sideboard, the finest Emily had ever seen. At the head of the enormous table, shot with the finest white tablecloth on which breakfast was set. Sitting there was an old woman with perfectly white hair, folded in a cochlea at the back of her head, an oval face with thin lips, and a small, straight nose on which round glasses sat. She looked unhappy. "Good morning. Sorry to keep you waiting, Mom." Alex greeted his mother politely. "But I had more than good reason." And he, putting his hand on Emily's back gently, pushed her toward the table. Birgit replied nonchalantly with a sip of tea. She didn't think another tearful interview with a young journalist was more important than having breakfast with her mother on Christmas Eve. It was as if he let her words slip past his ears. "Allow me to introduce Emily Zakharov's mother. She just flew in yesterday from Philadelphia." At these words, the woman's face stretched and stiffened. Her hand with her cup of tea dropped noisily onto the table. Why did the enormous liquid spill and left stains on the white tablecloth? She takes a few seconds to comprehend what is happening. Then she asked the now familiar Emily question, "How old are you, girl?" She looked so arrogant that Emily slowly began to guess why her mother ran away from her happiness as well. "I am 30 years old," the old lady frantically fished for air. "So this is your daughter," she said, looking at her son. "It's not hard to guess, given that you have the same face. I knew this moment would come sooner or later." Alex looked stunned, first at Emily, then at his mother. "You knew?" She was silent, and he repeated the question. "Did you know Wendy was pregnant?" The old woman was drinking her tea again. Her chin treacherously trembled. She stared out the window, where the December sun poured gold on the paths of the park. "I knew," she answered, sobbing. Alex moved closer to the table and sat down next to her. Emily cautiously crouched in the chair at the very end. "You knew I was going to be a father, and you didn't say anything," he whispered. For a moment, Emily thought he was going to hit her, the look in his eyes so frightening. All these years of pining for Wendy, suffering in the company of an unloved wife, tormented by the fact that I have no heirs. "You knew I had a child." Birgit was silent, not looking at him. Her eyes glittered. "What did you do?" Her son grabbed her wrists. "What did you do?" "All I did was for you, for the family," she blurted out. "What did you say to Wendy? Did you make her leave me? Answer me." Then the old woman burst into tears. Yes, it was my fault that she left. I threatened her that I would never accept her into my family, that you would sooner or later realize what a mistake you had made, that society would never accept her or her child. I told her she wouldn't get a penny of our fortune. And then I offered her money to go away, but she wouldn't take it. God, how could you? Dumbfounded, looked at her Alex. "It's my blood, Schwarzenberg's blood, after all." He nodded at Emily. "I was looking for them." Birgit blurted out, "I've been looking for years. When you divorced, I hired a private detective to find both Wendy and the baby. If he was born, I saw your anguish and regretted my action. But they weren't in Philadelphia. The string was cut in some provincial town where she was last seen. I wanted to make it right." She cried, waving her eyes with a handkerchief at Emily, who had lost her maternal grandmother. Even as a child, I felt sorry for her. Alex sat with his head down on his arm. Emily became uncomfortable, for they were talking as if she were not here. She suddenly thought of the house, of the novel A. She suddenly, deeply. She sighed, which attracted the attention of both her father and Emily's grandmother. Alex muttered, "You can't even imagine. I'm so sorry. You have grown away from your family, from me and our roots and our history. We have so much catching up to do. I had a mother. Sadly," she said, "and she always loved and supported me, so I wasn't alone." He moved toward her and took her hands in his. "Now no one will ever keep us apart." He glanced meaningfully at her mother, who was sobbing silently over her cup of tea. "You will live here in your own home, which belongs to you by right. If you don't want it, you can choose any house you like, and we'll buy it." He looked at her with such enthusiasm and hope that Emily dared not object. "I really want to get to know you better. My daughter is my child." He brought his lips to her hands. The girl noticed that the old woman was furtively looking at them and smiling through her tears. Emily spent the whole day in the company of her father, who did not want to part with her for a moment. Her belongings were brought from the hotel and laid out by the maid in one of the magnificent Victorian bedrooms, which were found on the 3rd floor. She and Alex had a long conversation in the living room, telling each other about their lives, and he eagerly caught every word concerning Wendy. When Emily told him that she had never had another man, he cried. From time to time, Birgit joined them, but her son did not really welcome her appearance, and she withdrew under some pretext. In the evening, they went for a walk around the world, and the father showed Emily the famous Basilica of Constantine and the grandiose street Peter's Cathedral, where festive services were being held. On the way, they repeatedly came across performers who smiled affably at all passers-by, and the girl even got into the spirit of a real Catholic Christmas. Once in the cathedral, Emily could not contain her admiration. A huge vaulted room with magnificent decoration of 1,000 candles, organ music, sarcophagi with relics of saints. Right in the stone floor were carved the names of bishops and cardinals. Buried here under slabs, polished young 1 million human feet. For several centuries, the cathedral had been full of people, and he and his father, unable to find a single vacant pew, stepped out again into the cold December air. Near the basilica, at a cozy outdoor cafe, Emily and Alex responded with a huge mulled wine and raw mozzarella balls and Christian cornflakes. Then we headed to the waterfront and took a long wander down the Moselle River to a pedestrian bridge into a respectable neighborhood of wealthy villas and mansions. "I got the best present this Christmas," with a smile said Alex, when they arrived at the gate of the princely residence. "I wish my happiness could never be complete without your mother. You must accept it and move on with your life, as I did." Emily shook his hand. He only nodded sadly, and they headed toward the house. In the dining room, as in the morning, Birgit was waiting for them. When they entered, she sat at the head of the table, stretched out like a string, and grudgingly pressed her already thin lips. Emily suddenly realized that she wasn't mad at her. She looked so guiltily unhappy that the girl, on a sudden impulse, went over to her and hugged her. Birgit jumped up in her chair in surprise and was taken aback. She looked at her son, who was as surprised as she was, and froze halfway to the table set for the festive dinner, expecting his left-handed mother to give an angry tirade about inappropriate behavior. The old woman gently dismissed her granddaughter and did not shed a tear. "Businesslike," she said, "since you were late for Christmas Eve, you don't have to change." Hearing these words, Duke Alex von Schwarzenberg laughed in relief. Christmas morning was overcast and rainy. Summer woke up on a giant bed in her now bedroom covered by the covers of the common house. And first of all, I dialed Rob's number. Weird. After a few long beeps, short ones were heard. Obviously, he had dropped the call. Emily missed him so desperately that she wasn't even happy to be reunited with her father. She felt lost and alone. Several times during the day, Emily called him, and history repeated itself. Evelyn listened to her story without breathing and promised to find out what had happened to Rob on December 31. A dinner party was scheduled, where Duke von Schwarzenberg planned to present his unexpected daughter to high society. On this occasion, tailors, stylists, reporters from local newspapers, and even one journalist from Berlin visited the house on the highway all day. Emily was deathly tired of such close attention to his person and evening. After dinner, they spent the evening alone with her father in the far drawing room, where the fireplace was blazing hot. This time she shared with him her dreams of professional fulfillment, which he accepted enthusiastically, suggesting that she set up her own business here in Germany. He spoke so enthusiastically about it, listened so attentively to her, that the girl felt ashamed that his plans were not destined to come true. After the new year, she would fly home to the USA, where there was a man for whose sake she would give up even the prospect of living here near her family. Maybe she'll tell Alex. Maybe he'll even understand her, because he, too, had a great love in his life. She holds nothing back. She told her father the long story of their relationship, reinforced by stories of his responsibility to his sick sister and how Emily's meeting with her father was due only to his efforts and connections. Alex listened with the utmost interest. "So this young man is very important in your life." He tilted his head to the side with a smile and looked adoringly at his daughter. Emily nodded, "And he must be very resentful of me." Why did the girl tell her father from the branch about the money she had left before she left? Oh, women. Alex said with a slight reproach. "How reckless you are in your good deeds. Of course he resents you, my dear." "And what am I to do?" Her voice trembled treacherously. "Run to him, of course. What about you? What about the reception?" He laughed. "But we'll have the reception on the morning of January 1. I'll arrange everything to Philadelphia. Just promise to come back to me." "I promise." "Daddy." Emily was so grateful to him that she didn't hold back and snuggled into her father's chest. He gently stroked her hair and added, "I will call a good friend of mine in Berlin. He is a professor of luminary medicine. We will try to help your lover's sister." "Thank you very much." "Thank you," hotly thanked the girl. A few minutes later, she was already climbing the stairs to her room with the intention of calling Evelyn right away. The uncertainty was killing Emily. She hadn't heard her voice in 2 days, having checked in her bedroom. She immediately dialed her friend's number. "Hello," she heard a hoarse voice. "Evelyn, Emily, are you there?" "I'm a little confused, Emily. What's wrong with your voice? It turned out that Evelyn had come down with a fever, never having had a chance to see Rob. Evelyn's calls are also being dropped by him, wishing her friend a speedy recovery and disconnected. Emily dialed Jenna's number. "The caller is out of range of the network," said Nasty Voice on the phone, that the only thing left to do is to bombard social media. What on earth was going on? Suddenly something was wrong. Emily was filled with wonderment. The 3 days before the appointment flew by quickly. To get to know her many uncles and children, to get to know her father and grandmother better, and to realize that her life would never be the same again. On the day of her appointment, Emily woke up with a terrible headache. She dreamt of Rob reaching out to her, sick Evelyn and Jenna in a jersey and hat in a hospital bed. On top of that, the phone was still silent. All her calls went unanswered, dangling her bare feet off the bed. Emily dialed Rob's number again. Silence again. She couldn't stand it any longer. No sooner had the girl put the phone away than the bell rang. It was Evelyn. "Hello." Emily answered in a husky voice. "Something has happened. Rob has been in an accident. I don't know anything myself, because I'm still lying in bed." Emily wouldn't listen to her. 15 minutes later, she was standing in the living room of her new house, suitcase in hand, explaining herself to her father. The house was already ready for her. Additional hired servants scurried back and forth with a tray and candelabra-type tablecloth and porter. The smells from the kitchen were terrific. She was so nervous her hands were shaking. Alex sat her down in a chair, poured her a glass of wine, and picked up her phone. About 20 minutes later, she had tickets booked for a direct flight Frankfurt, Philadelphia, and from Philadelphia to Rob's farm. She is scheduled to land at the East Airport at 10 p.m. sharp. The personal driver Duke von Schwarzenberg, an hour and a half before she starts from Trier to Frankfurt. And soon Emily was on her way to the USA. The day raced by in the same breath, and sitting in the cab that was taking her from Ulyanovsk Airport, Emily pondered the possibility that she might lose Rob. What was wrong with him? Are his injuries severe? None of this she knew. All she knew was the hospital he was in. Evelyn texted her. When Emily was still in the sky, falling off her feet from exertion and fatigue, Emily literally fell out of a Yandex cab outside the Central City Hospital. Dragging her suitcases behind her, she passed the emergency room, which for some reason was empty. From somewhere came the music and noise. The fun suddenly came to her. Today is December 31st, New Year's Eve. How could she have forgotten about it? Finally, from the lawsuit countless corridors of the emergency room, a girl in a white coat and handing her a 50 euros bill, Emily, being almost half hysterical, asked to escort her to Rob's room. What was in the trauma ward? A young nurse looked round her eyes at the crazy girl with the suitcase, demanding a date with the patient. But she took the money and walked Emily to the right room. Floor, I don't know. I'm sorry, but I can ask, timidly risked the girl. Emily nodded. Oh, it's almost 12 on New Year's Eve. The girl flustered and hurriedly retreated. Emily quickly proceeded into the ward, throwing her sister's suitcase. The hallway was quiet, and Emily, gathering her courage, prepared to knock on all the doors. She barely put her hand over the door of the first room. It opened, and Emily saw the light on her haggard face in surprise. She flinched so hard that she hurt the glass that carried the light. What happened? Emily heard Rob's faint voice. Emily quickly hugged the light, and without saying anything, burst into the room. The room was single and dark. Only a small boss burned on one bollard. On a high bed that stood in the center of the room lay a man, the most desirable in the world. His head and torso were wrapped in bandages. His left leg was hanging from the hood. He and Emily stared at each other in silence until the fireworks went off outside the windows. Happy New Year, Rob. She cautiously crouched on the edge of the bed and saw that there were tears glistening in his eyes. Happy New Year, Emily, he smiled. You came. What did you think? Through her tears, she laughed. That I would trade you for a foreign prince. He was guilty and silent. My God, what a fool you are. Rob is simply impenetrable. She brought her face close to his. Their lips met at that moment. Emily realized how much she needed him like air, like light. She had loved him all her life, hiding, running away from her feelings, wasting precious time with the wrong person and the wrong people. She would not make such a mistake again. Rob embraced her gently but powerfully, as if he wanted to show her that he would never let her go anywhere again. "Sweetheart," I was so bored by the door. Looking at them, Jenna stood and cried with happiness. They welcomed spring in Berlin, where Jenna was undergoing immune therapy. Her vitals improved, and the attending physician Emily told them about. Alex soon informed them that the disease had gone into remission. Back in Trier, Emily became more and more attached to her new relatives, who turned out to be crazy about Rob. At the end of March, they were already cuddling at the airport with Jenna, who had come to their engagement party. It was warm and sunny. Nature was waking up from her winter slumber and pleased the eyes with fresh greenery, parks, and squares. In the waiting room, Emily and Rob were holding hands when they saw a familiar figure in the crowd. Taking the huge suitcase from her hands, Rob began to walk through the crowd of greeters and arrivals, and the girls, embracing, followed him. "Do you know who I saw the other day at the women's clinic? Your ex-boyfriend," she whispered in Emily's ear. "He brought his receptionist to the ultrasound, and they were arguing, right in front of the office, because she got the accents wrong. Come to think of it, I said hello, of course, and glimpsed that you had found your German Duke father. You should have seen the look on your future daddy's face that would have stretched." Emily laughed. "Would your face be stretching now?" "Come on," Evelyn squinted his left eye. "You're going to be an auntie and godmother soon enough." "My mother's woman," Evelyn gusted, hugged her friend, and tears spurted from her eyes. Emily, wow. "I'm so happy for you. Hey, what's with the flood?" Rob came over to them and put his arm around both their shoulders. "It's okay, yeah," Emily whispered as she snuggled into his shoulder. "It's definitely okay now."